I'm in Konoha and I want to be Hokage. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, Convinced or Not. The strong wind dissipated. Shikato retracted his fist and turned to look at Jiraiya. By the way, what did you just say? Jiraiya opened his mouth wide and didn't come back to his senses for a long time. A shock wave of that magnitude was blown up with just one punch? Is this something a human can do? Minato was also a little surprised. Shikato, you are exaggerating. In the valley, Akemichi Choza and Yamanaka Inochi, who were supporting the perception barrier, were also quite speechless. Every time they saw Shikato take action, it felt like they could re-understand a new world. Too scary. Shikato turned around and looked at the runaway Kushina, moved his knuckles, and then hooked his finger at her. Little fox, I tell you, good children only get candy, and bad children get punched. Then he instructed Minato, watch the opportunity to stabilize the seal again, I will try my best to delay it. Just as he finished speaking, Kushina, who had transformed into a half-tailed beast, had already slapped the air, and a deep red chakra hand snaked out. Like a long snake coming out of a cave, it rushed straight towards the deer man. You have a bad temper, the deer man raised the corner of his mouth. He liked this kind of straightforwardness. It's more interesting to fight like this. The deer man stretched out his hand and grabbed the attacking chakra hand tightly. Where the fingers and palms touched, there was a sizzling sound and white smoke rose repeatedly. At the same time, the whole person was forced to slide dozens of meters on the ground by the huge impact force. 2 deep shoe prints were scratched on the ground. The deer man still held the chakra hand tightly in his hand and pulled it back suddenly. More than 100 meters away, the runaway Kushina was dragged and flew over. The deer man used one trick to eat all the world. He grabbed the chakra hand with one hand and clenched his fist with the other hand. He stretched his arms and twisted his waist. When the person was in the air, a black and red chakra hand stretched out from Kushina's body again. He clenched his fist and punched the deer man in the side of his face from a distance. Deerman only tilted his head, but the ground was hit by the terrifying force and collapsed in an instant. At the same time, Deerman's counterattack punch also hit the side of the face of the runaway Kushina. Kushina was like a kite that had lost its string, spinning and flying away, and even vomited a large mouthful of blood in midair. Deerman was a little embarrassed. Oops, he didn't control his strength well. Minato opened his mouth and couldn't close it. Is this the strength of Deerman? Fighting the tail beast? This is like a dream. Jiraiya, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? The chakra hand that Deerman grabbed in his hand had been blown away with a runaway Kushina, and turned into strands of chakra and disappeared. He looked back at Jiraiya, looked him up and down, and didn't say anything, just chuckled lightly. Then he turned around and pounced on Kushina who was flying away. The last chuckle made Jiraiya feel a strong sense of sarcasm, and it was a guy he disliked very much, which made him even angrier. Deep down in his heart, he was determined not to lose to him. In a fit of anger, he bit his thumb and slapped the ground with one hand. Spirit summoning technique. A small cloud of smoke exploded, and then 2 petite toads appeared in the same place. Fukasaku Sage, Shima Sage. Minato was stunned for a moment. Teacher Jiraiya, there is no need to do this, right? After Jiraiya summoned 2 great sage assistants, he was full of confidence. Minato, you guys help me hold on for a few minutes, I will be ready soon. Sage Fukasaku, little Jiraiya, what are you doing? How could the 9 tails Jinchuriki go berserk? Minato took the initiative to explain. Sir Fukasaku, Kushina is trying to practice perfect Jinchuriki, so I deliberately weakened the 8 diagrammed seal a little, but this attempt was a failure. Sage Shima complained about him. You are really messing around. At this point, it pointed to the other side. By the way, who is the kid who is rushing towards Kushina over there? Nara Shikato. I don't know him. Sage Shima shook his head, but he is really messing around. Why would you ask such a person for help? If you go up like this, you will be sending yourself to. Before he finished speaking, he saw Shikato rushing to Kushina who had smashed a large pile of rocks. The runaway Kushina had no sense of pain, but after realizing the deer man's weirdness, a chakra hand shot out from her shoulder, grabbed the gap in the rock in the distance, and flew out with a force. Bang! She was only halfway up when her ankle was caught by the deer man. The state of only 4 tails was not enough. The deer man grabbed the right ankle of the runaway Kushina with one hand, and punched it again with the other hand. The goal of this punch was the abdomen, and the purpose was to hit it temporarily unable to move. The runaway Kushina was obviously also afraid of the deer man's fist. The tailed beast coat spread out a chakra hand again, and instantly wrapped around the deer man's arm. At the same time, she turned her head and began to condense the tailed beast J towards the deer man's face. The black and purple terrifying light wave expanded little by little. Minato saw that the situation was not good and was about to go over to help. As a result, the deer man tilted his head back and hit the runaway Kushina's head with a fierce headbutt. Bang! The strong shock wave rolled around. The half-condensed tailed beast ball of runaway Kushina was silenced. She shook her beast-like black and red head, and seemed to be a little dizzy for a short time. The hand that was holding the deer man's chakra loosened a little. The deer man pulled his hand away, put his hands together, and smashed down on the runaway Kushina on the spot. Runaway Kushina only had time to make a small piece of white exoskeleton appear on the surface of her body. She didn't have time to recover at all, so she couldn't dodge in time, and even directly used her chest to block it. The next second, the white bone layer was smashed to pieces, and the whole person fell heavily to the ground. Boom! The ground spread in all directions like a spider web. The huge cracks even climbed up the valley along the stone wall. Sage Shima, send. It couldn't send any more, so it turned to Sage Fukasaku and said, Dad, is this kid a human? Sage Fukasaku, what nonsense are you talking about? It's obvious. Of course not. How can this monster be a human? Have you ever seen a human being beat up a tailed beast in close combat? Even a half-tailed beast wouldn't be beaten like this. Jiraiya was still maintaining the preparatory movements of Sage mode, and he looked a bit like a muggle at this moment. It was agreed that I would take the lead and suppress. How did it become like this? Is the 4-tailed beast stay too weak? Why does it seem to be over before I even make a move? Deerman grabbed the 2 big ears on the tailed beast coat and forcibly pulled the runaway Kushina up from the ground. Then he swung his fist at her and punched her. Do you accept it? Runaway Kushina had no reason at all, and frantically manipulated the tailed beast coat to launch various attacks, knocking and hitting Deerman, but it all ended up tickling. Shikato didn't care about this level of counterattack at all. Instead, he punched Kushina and made her stunned for several seconds. Every time he punched her, her body arched backwards, and the ripples of shock spread out in an arc. Every punch was heavy and heavy. Bang, bang, bang. Do you accept it? Do you accept it? Do you accept it? I told you to behave, but you didn't. I told you to take a punch, and you will take a punch. As ninjas, we always keep our promises. Punch, punch, punch after punch. Simple and direct, but extremely effective. This scene was truly horrifying, and it stunned everyone else. Chapter 52, Unique Style. After a brief moment of daze, Minato Namikaze immediately recovered from his shock. No, the person being beaten seems to be my wife. Minato immediately became anxious, because Shikato was beating her too easily. You said you would hold her back for me until I found an opportunity to reinforce the seal? In the end, you call this holding her back? He didn't have time to think about it, and immediately flew over with a flying thunder god technique to stop Shikato. He felt very sorry for his wife. Don't hit me, Shikato. If you keep hitting me, I'll be transformed. Please, be gentle. Kushina, who had transformed into a half-tailed beast, was furious at this moment, and her eyes were red. Seeing that her tailed beast coat had no effect on Shikato, she opened her mouth and began to condense the tailed beast ball again, aiming at Shikato and shooting. But in the 4-tailed state, the condensation speed was not fast. Shikato went up and punched her, and the tailed beast ball was silenced again. Minato Namikaze could see clearly that Kushina had already spurted blood foam from her mouth. Seeing that Shikaman was going to continue beating her, he could not help but complain with heartache. Enough, enough, Shikaman, be gentle. It's not that your wife, don't feel sorry for her, right? Shikaman said as a matter of course, I'll help you beat it. Minato Namikaze, I don't know if the 9 tails has been subdued, but if you continue to beat her, I'm afraid Kushina will be beaten to death by you. Leave it to me next. He was really afraid that Shikaman would hide her harder and Kushina would be beaten to death by him. In order to prevent Shikaman from getting addicted to beating people, Minato quickly seized the opportunity and reinforced the Bagua seal on Kushina's stomach again. Kushina, who was still struggling violently, stopped immediately. At the same time, the dark red-tailed beast coat on her body began to fade gradually, and finally disappeared completely, revealing Kushina, who was in a semi-comatose state. Looking at the blood spilling from the corners of Kushina's mouth, the multiple fist marks all over her body, and the 2 black eye sockets, Minato felt so distressed. But he couldn't say anything. After all, he personally asked Shikato to help. Kushina had kindly reminded Shikato to be careful beforehand, and asked him to deal with emergencies with the intention of killing her. Minato originally thought that Shikato's polite words at that time were because he didn't know the horror of Jinchuriki, but now it seems that it's really not the case. At this time, in another direction, Jiraiya was still maintaining the preparatory movements of the Sage Mode, posing motionlessly for a while. Shikato turned his head at the right time. "Jiraiya-sama, what is this pose? It's quite unique." Jiraiya was silent by this sentence. His Sage Mode preparatory time is a bit long. Even with the help of Fukasaku and Shima, it still takes a certain amount of buffer time to successfully activate. As a result, during this short period of time, the 4-tailed Kushina was subdued. This made Jiraiya, who was originally ready to show his power, look extremely embarrassed. Shima Sage whispered, "Little Jiraiya, he seems to be laughing at you, right?" Fukasaku Sage, "How can it be said that he is laughing at little Jiraiya? But what he said is also true. If you are not strong enough, you have to admit it. It's nothing. We have nothing to do here. Let's go, mother." "Little Jiraiya, don't be too sad. With your strength, you can still suppress the 9 tails Jinchuriki in the 4 tails state." After comforting him, Shima Sage and Fukasaku Sage disappeared in a bang. After all, it was not only Jiraiya who was embarrassed as Jiraiya's contracted beasts, they also felt embarrassed. Jiraiya was still in a petrified state. It took him a long time to close his mouth. He was extremely embarrassed by the stare of the deer man. Finally, he gritted his teeth and posed for the end, the heroic story of the Toad Sage, the final bullet, the curtain. Tap tap tap, the whole person stood on tiptoe on one foot, waved his hands and turned in a circle on the spot, indicating the hero's curtain call. Shikato kept staring at him without blinking. When Jiraiya turned around awkwardly, he almost dug out a 3-bedroom, 2-living-room apartment on the ground. He could only deal with it in this self-deprecating way. Ahem. Kushina woke up from her coma. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, her physique was very strong. She raised her head and saw the concerned eyes of her husband Minato Namikaze, and saw Lord Jiraiya and Shikato Nara, as well as Yamanaka Inoichi, Akimichi Choza, Nara Shikato and others. She was a little disappointed. "Did you fail?" Hiss. She just moved a little, and her body, side face, and eye sockets were all in pain, making her gasp. Then a vague memory came out. Although her consciousness was eroded by the 9 tails before and the control of her body was taken away, she could still see everything outside, but she just couldn't feel it. So she rubbed the several bruises on her body while focusing her eyes on Shikato again. Kushina smiled, a very bright smile. While laughing, she struggled to get up, laughing with gritted teeth. "Little brother Shikato, you enjoyed the beating just now, didn't you?" Shikato didn't want to ridicule Jiraiya, and instead perfunctorily said to Kushina, "It has nothing to do with me. You made me take the initiative to kill you." Hiss. Hairhead. "Should I thank you?" "You're welcome. You're really being polite to me. Don't you understand good or bad words? Then what do you say? Stretch your head over here. Let me hit you too." Shikato looked at Kushina in embarrassment. Nara Shikato also hesitated to speak, and couldn't bear to watch any more, so he turned his head away. Kushina rubbed her eyes and urged, "Hurry up, you are so excessive to me, I must hit you back." Thinking of how hard this kid hid her chest, Kushina blushed and got angry. "If he gets beaten, what will I do with my children in the future? Damn brat. Hurry up, or I'll really get angry." "Okay, since you insist, then you do it." Deer Man resigned himself to his fate and moved closer, then lowered his head. Kushina looked like a little fox who had succeeded in her evil plan, and then punched Deer Man on the top of his head with all her might. "You little bastard, if you hit me there, I'll beat you so hard that you won't grow any taller." Bang! After the punch, Deer Man stood up again unharmed. Kushina trembled all over, then squatted down with her fists in her hands, her body twitching. Deer Man was a little surprised. "What's wrong with you? Does it hurt so much?" He really didn't know. After all, it was usually not him who was in pain, and the top-level domineering was just that, domineering. Kushina was squatting on the ground. When she heard what Shikato said, she turned around. Her beautiful big eyes were already filled with tears of grievance. She held her hands together, bit her lips and looked at Shikato. "Woo, why are you so stubborn?" Shikato complained about her mercilessly. "You are going to have a baby, so stop pretending to be cute, okay?" Kushina blushed and said proudly, "I like it, what do you care about me?" "Humph, our business is not over yet." Namake's Minato came over and said with a smile, "Okay, stop it, Kushina, Shikato is here to help us after all." Kushina stood up and said aggrievedly, "But I always feel that he beat me up. Minato, where are my kunai and shuriken?" "Shikato, don't run away." Kushina chuckled, Okay, I'm just kidding." Jiraiya stood there silently, feeling that there seemed to be one more fish here, and he felt a little lonely. Chapter 53 The Fourth Hokage. The strength shown by Shikato this time made Minato and his wife completely relieved. In the following period of time, with Shikato's help, Kushina basically had no worries when practicing the perfect Jinchuriki. It was just a little painful every time it was over. I have to say that the Bagua seal on Kushina's body is really powerful. It is even more perfect than the iron armor seal of the Land of Lightning. This should be the most perfect of the many sealing techniques for sealing-tailed beasts. With a complete version of the Bagua seal, the nine-tailed fox will not have any idea of showing up. So every time they practice, they must weaken the power of the Bagua seal to allow Kushina and the nine-tailed fox to communicate. In terms of the attainments of the sealing technique, Kushina is a master, and Minato Namikaze is also very proficient. With this couple, the power of the Bagua seal is controlled very exquisitely. Every time Kushina failed in her practice and went berserk, at most only 4 tails emerged, and they were always suppressed below the state of 4 tails and 4 tails. Even though it was beaten again and again by Deerman, Kyuubi's temper never broke out. Every time it appeared, it would bar its teeth and wish to bite Deerman to death, but because it was always suppressed in the 4 tails state, it couldn't even put up a decent resistance. So after several consecutive times, Kyuubi realized the cruelty of reality and chose to lie down. He simply ignored Kushina. "Humph, at worst, I won't go out. Want to be a perfect Jinchuriki? No way. I'll weld all the windows for you. Wasn't it cool when I was sealed? After so many years, this damn sealing technique can't even let me take a look at the scenery outside, and you still want me to cooperate? Dream on." So far, Kushina's wish to be a perfect Jinchuriki can only be temporarily shattered. Kyuubi ignored people and didn't go berserk. It chose to lie down. If it came out, it would be beaten, and it couldn't completely release itself. That's why ghosts come out. However, Kushina's wish was shattered, while Namikaze Minato's wish came true. Konoha's fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato. This was the news brought back by the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. The Fire Country daimyo was successfully persuaded by him. As for how he said it, it was not convenient to say. Anyway, Danzo didn't have this ability, which directly led to Orochimaru, who cooperated with him, being helplessly eliminated. However, Orochimaru didn't seem to care too much about being eliminated. He continued to immerse himself in the laboratory and didn't come out. He was even more obsessed than usual. After Danzo came back, he looked in a bad mood, and his gloomy face made others a little daunted. The atmosphere in the route seemed extremely depressing, and even the deer people stopped teasing him. Unlike the route, the outside world has been thriving, as if it had entered spring overnight. Promotional news about the new Hokage, the fourth Hokage Namikaze Minato, was posted everywhere. For Namikaze Minato, the village generally had a good impression. The main reason is that Minato made a great reputation during the 3 wars. It can be said that throughout the entire Third Ninja World War, Minato Namikaze has never lost a battle, and his record is so luxurious that it is simply blinding. Especially in the battle against the Land of Earth, more than 50 rock ninja Johnins were killed in one go. Even if there is some exaggeration in this, the result is enough to make people stunned. Today is the day for Minato Namikaze to be officially announced. He had already started to adapt to the work of Hokage in advance, but the official announcement was delayed until today. On the Hokage building, Minato Namikaze stood at the forefront of the rooftop, followed by the third-generation Sarutobi Hiruzen, the senior advisor of the Hokage Midikato N, Utatane Kahuru, as well as Jiraiya and Kushina. Looking at Minato standing in front of the rooftop, full of vigor and vitality. Jiraiya sighed, "Minato will be a qualified Hokage, I seem to have seen it." Sarutobi Hiruzen took a puff of cigarette. "Well, Minato is a qualified successor to the Will of Fire. But he is still a little too young. If there are things he doesn't understand in the future, please help him more. Senior advisors Utane Kaharu and Madakato nodded seriously. It is the job of the older generation to support young people. Jiraiya glanced at Sarutobi teacher, and seemed to be hesitant to speak. Minato, he will probably arrange his own people as Hokage advisors. Isn't it a bit too early for Sarutobi teacher to tell you? A large number of Konoha ninjas have gathered under the Hokage building. There are new generations, as well as middle-aged and young generations. People from the ANBU and even the route can occasionally be seen on the streets or in corners. Shikato sat on the roof of a house, avoiding the dense crowd below, and sat there alone. Below were the Konoha ninjas with endless noise. Most people were very excited, looking up at Minato Namikaze on the Hokage building, full of vision and hope for the future. Shikato sat on the edge of the eaves and turned his head to look at a figure that suddenly jumped up. A very eye-catching ball nose, Uchiha Shisu, Sr. Shikato looked at him, and then looked at the other little guy who jumped up with Uchiha Shisu. He was only 4 or 5 years old, with short black hair, dark pupils, and a little tear groove under the corners of the eyes and on both sides of the nose. Brother Shisu, you are too fast. The tiny Uchiha Itachi was panting and leaning on his knees. Shisu noticed Shikato's gaze and immediately introduced him. This is my friend, Itachi, Uchiha Itachi. Itachi, this is the senior Jonin Nara Shikato. Shikato glanced at them both. Is there anything? Nothing. Shisu scratched his head, a little embarrassed. It's just that I saw you here alone. I felt lonely, so, at the end, he paused for a moment, but the meaning was clear. Shikato glanced at him. Lonely? Not really, it's just too noisy down there. Just as he finished speaking, 2 more shadows flashed down. Mabu jumped up with a large lunchbox, a little out of breath. My lord, your lunch is ready. Samu didn't say anything, but just looked at the Uchiha brothers on the side with curiosity. Shisu and Itachi were also curious about Samu and Mabu. The two of them didn't wear Konoha forward protectors, but judging from their skills, they seemed to be ninjas, and their threat level was not low. Could it be that this was the secret seed that the senior had quietly cultivated in the root department? Shisu suddenly had some yearning. The senior really had a heart for light. Even though he was in such a dark place, he was always cultivating new saplings for Konoha. Shikato was puzzled by his gaze, so he opened the lunchbox sent by Mabu. The portion inside was quite large. So he asked symbolically, do you want to eat? Shisu shook his head politely. Itachi also shook his head politely, but he couldn't help but look at the 3 colored meatballs in the lunchbox again and again. Gurgle, Itachi's stomach suddenly growled in a very appropriate way. Suddenly, Itachi's whole face turned red, and he hurriedly said, it's because I forgot to bring the lunchbox that my mother asked me to take when I went out this morning. Shikato didn't care. Let's eat together. Then he turned to Mabu and said, Mabu, can I trouble you again? Mabu immediately made a bitter face. I still have to do it, can't I? No problem. It will be ready soon. Thank you. Don't say that. It's my honor. On the side, Samu curled his lips. Dog liquor. At the same time, Namikaze Minato's inauguration speech was almost coming to an end. From today on, Konoha will be governed by me. I will do my best to help everyone in the village, and will restore Konoha to its former glory and make everyone happy and healthy. I am the 4th generation Hokage of Konoha Ninja Village, Namikaze Minato. Downstairs, countless people immediately responded with enthusiastic cheers. Chapter 54 Shisu and Itachi. Several people sat on the eaves and ate quietly. Uchiha Itachi secretly looked at Shikato from time to time, and was a little curious about this senior that even elder brother Shisu admired. Shikato ate slowly and seemed to be oblivious to the enthusiastic noise below. Uchiha Shisu also looked at him, and finally had something to say, and couldn't help asking, Senior, can I ask you something? Shikato, you are welcome, don't be too restrained. Uchiha Shisu raised his head. I want to hear what you think of Uchiha. Uchiha Itachi also stopped when he heard this, with 2 3-color balls still stuffed in his mouth, looking at elder brother Shisu with a bulging mouth, and then at senior Shikato. He is still too young now. Although he has seen the cruelty of the last war, he has matured too early at a young age and longs for peace. But he still doesn't know the contradictions between the family and the village. Shisu looked up. Uchiha? Shisu nodded vigorously. Yes, do you also think that our Uchiha clan is born evil? In the conference room before, he was accused of being an evil clan by Konoha's high-level consultants. This was a big blow to Uchiha Shisu. He had already felt the disharmony between the clan and the village. Shisu's tone was relatively calm. No one is born evil. If there is, it is forced. When a person is defined as evil by a group of people, or a group of people is defined as evil by a larger group of people, then whether he or they are evil or not is no longer meaningful. Uchiha Itachi was a little confused, but the meatballs were really delicious. Uchiha Shisu seemed to understand, and changed the subject. Then, if you were the leader of the Uchiha clan, how would you lead the Uchiha? Shikato thought for a moment and told the truth. If it were me, I would probably lead the entire clan to leave Konoha. After all, we are tired of each other, so it is better to part ways. If I stay here, you will hate me, and I will be disgusted if I stay. It would be better for me to leave here and pretend that we don't know each other. Of course, the outcome of leaving should be the same as the outcome of a coup. In the ninja world, leaving the village without permission can be defined as a traitor. It can be said that a person's birth determines everything in the future. Born as a Konoha person, you must be a Konoha ghost in death. This is a ninja, seemingly unrestrained, but in fact there is no freedom. Those who can really act freely like Jiraiya and Tsunade, unless they have a great background and special reasons, don't even think about it. Let's not talk about Tsunade. Jiraiya is also a best-selling author and the proud disciple of the Sandaime. Although his works are a bit dirty, their sales are amazing. His royalties are very gratifying. He donated most of the money to Konoha, which can be regarded as a money to buy his life, allowing him to wander around without being constrained by missions or restricted by the top. Under normal circumstances, if you want to leave the village privately and move freely, you will receive a bounty warrant within 3 days. Shikato's seemingly ordinary words surprised Shisu and Itachi. The whole clan leaving Konoha. They have never thought about such a thing, nor did they dare to think about it, because it is too dangerous. But since it came to this, Shikato simply let his thoughts fly and said to Shisu and Itachi, who were very precocious, the world of ninja is cruel. And it is full of hatred. Between people, between families, between villages, and between countries. What if we only focus on what one person, one family, one village, or even one country has? The rules of this land have been around for too long, and someone needs to change it, or break it. Shisu and Itachi looked at each other, both looking at Shikato in shock. Senior, you just kidding, haha, you two seem to be very serious, you are a little too precocious, is it really a joke? Uchiha Shisu hesitated to speak, but he was still very grateful for Shikato's confession. If he didn't regard them as trustworthy people, how could he say such treasonous words to their faces? Standing by Shikato, Samu was actually deeply touched. In the decades she knew, the ninja world had already experienced 3 large-scale wars. It was only a few decades, and a generation had not even turned over a chapter, but it had already fought 3 times. It was so lively that it was jaw-dropping. This is why the ninja school only has a 6-year system, and students can skip grades continuously. Because of the frequent wars, there is not enough time to wait for the ninjas to grow up slowly. In this kind of war, the average life expectancy of ninjas is directly stuck in the 30s, or even lower. This is a terrifying thing. The ninja world seems colorful, but it is actually hopelessly rotten. Maybe it's time to make some changes. In the eyes of Shikato, this world saw. There is no peace without nuclear war. Only those who have experienced nuclear war know that peace is as precious as peace. After a brief shock, Shisu thought carefully for a while, and then asked, Senior, do you think Uchiha has no other choice? As he said that, he cast his eyes on the 4th-generation Namikaze Minato, who is welcoming the enthusiastic cheers of the villagers and ninjas of Konoha. The 4th generation seems to be because of the trustworthy Hokage. Shikato also looked over and said lightly, maybe, other options? That depends on whether the Hokage has the courage. The Uchiha really has few options left. Shikato said again in a comforting tone, but it is developing in a good direction after all. At least the team led by the 4th generation is more gentle to the Uchiha than the team led by the 3rd generation. It can only be said that the 2nd generation has too much influence. After all, the team left by the 2nd generation has become the top management. And the only Uchiha surname among them has been sacrificed too early. For the remaining F4, there is nothing to say, just keep calling out to the Uchiha. If it weren't for Sarutobi Hiruzen being relatively indecisive, the Uchiha would have suffered a long time ago. Konoha F4 perfectly inherited the malice of the 2nd generation towards the Uchiha, and even continued to develop and expand it. At least during the 2nd generation, The Uchiha's upward path has not been completely blocked. Now, just go to bed. Let's go, it's time to go back. Shikato patted his butt and stood up. No matter how the ninja world changes, one's own foundation must be consolidated. If you don't want to be changed, then try to change it. So strength is the main theme of all this. Uchiha Shiso immediately stood up. Senior, thank you very much. Seeing that elder brother Shiso stood up, Uchiha Itachi also stood up hurriedly, and the three-colored meatball in his mouth had not been swallowed yet. Shifeng Rest Shikato was stunned by what he said. Itachi blushed a little, chewed hard for a few times, and quickly swallowed a meatball in his mouth. Shikato smiled and finally said, Uchiha Shiso, teach the kid next to you well. You two are most likely to decide the future of Uchiha, so look at the long term. Uchiha Shiso died a little too early in the original work. Otherwise, it is really uncertain how Uchiha will evolve. But one thing is certain, Uchiha Shiso definitely did not teach Itachi to slaughter the entire Uchiha clan. Shiso advocates protecting Konoha and Uchiha. Uchiha is equally important in his heart, otherwise he would not have received such high support from the clan. And Itachi is the true role model of the will of fire. Parents threaten Konoha, kill them. Lovers threaten Konoha, kill them. Clan members threaten Konoha, kill them. Brother threatens Konoha, don't kill him for the time being, give him a chance. For Konoha, Itachi killed all the people in the clan, young and old, hundreds of people, leaving only one brother. He is undoubtedly a brother-control ruthless person. If such a ruthless person appeared in the Nara clan, Shikarin would slap him in the face. But since it is from another clan, and it is still so small now, Shikarin will not look at him with tinted glasses. It has advanced to the second round, and I will continue to ask for follow-up reading. Please try not to keep it during the new book period. Next week we'll enter a larger plot. Shikarin will gradually break free from the shackles and completely let himself go. The eyes of the Soaring Eagle are only the sky. What the hell is land? Just go to hell. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, 8 Diagrams Seal. A few days later, an unexpected visitor came to the underground base where Shikato was temporarily staying. It has been a while since Kushina last practiced a perfect Jinchuriki. Since the Nine Tails lay flat and died, Kushina has never had the opportunity to talk to the Nine Tails again, probably because she was unwilling to accept it. After discussing with Minato, she found Shikato again. Shikato, you haven't given up yet? The Nine Tails obviously refused to establish contact with you. If it doesn't cooperate, I can't do anything. Kushina smiled and said, it doesn't matter. The reason why the Nine Tails no longer shows up is because it is always restricted to the Four Tails state. If the Bagua seal is weakened to a greater extent, I believe it will still be unable to bear it. I want to try again, and Minato also agreed, it's really messing around. In the Four Tails state, your body has to bear a lot of burden. Even if you are a member of the Uzumaki clan, you can't do this. It's okay, I can bear it. I want to hold on a little longer. For the sake of the child, this little bit of suffering and this little bit of sin is nothing. Only by becoming a perfect Jinchuriki can the danger of the tailed beast in the body to the child be minimized. As long as there is a slight chance of success, she wants to try it. Unless it is really impossible. The question now is, Shikato, can you guarantee that you can suppress several of my tails during the rampage stage? 9. I guess it's unlikely. Don't breathe so hard, little brat. Can you please talk properly, to be on the safe side? 6 at most. More than that may be a bit tricky. With 7 tails, the tailed beast balls can be released continuously, which will pose a considerable threat to Shikato. In that case, Shikato can no longer guarantee that he can restrain his strength. Rakujo? You're quite impressive, kid. Tell me, what's the matter with your taijutsu? Tell me, stay away from me, tell me, there's no outsider here, don't feel so good about yourself, and you'd better have some awareness of being a wife. Tisk, how old are you? Just a teenager. I treat you as my stinky younger brother. By the way, I don't even have a younger brother. Aren't younger brothers fun? You're so annoying. Can you get down to business? Okay, you're so boring. The businesses. The task of weakening the 8 gossip seal may also be handed over to you. I don't know the 8 gossip seal. What about Minato-senpai? Him? Huh? Don't mention him. Ever since he became Hokage, he has so many things to do every day, as if the village can't get going without him, and there's no free time at all. I'm saying let him weaken the 8 gossip seal, not to listen to you complain about your married life. Sis, you'd better stop. Huh? Are you calling me sis? Play by yourself. Shikato turned and walked away, but he hadn't taken 2 steps when someone grabbed him by the corner of his clothes. He turned back. Kushina was looking at him pitifully. Her beautiful big eyes seemed to be filled with crystal clear tears. Don't go, good brother. Shikato suddenly startled and felt a chill. Get out, hey. Nara Shikato, don't refuse a toast and then drink a forfeit. If you make me angry, I will beat you up. Hey, I'm serious. Hey, don't go. Stop right there, stop right there. Stop, please, I beg you. Finally, Kushina directly used the method of pretending to be pitiful, grabbing Shikato's clothes and refusing to let go. Shikato's face was a little dark. Can you still talk properly? Yes, I will speak simply and directly next time. Brat, not cute at all. Speak. Oh, that's right. Minato is too busy with the work at hand, so the task of weakening the 8 trigram seal can only be left to you. I don't know how to do it. I'll teach you. Wouldn't it be more convenient for you to do it yourself? I can't control the strength of the weakening. Everything else is fine. As long as the 8 trigram seal is weakened a little, the 9-tailed fox will continue to look for opportunities to influence me. At that time, it will be easy for it to mix into the 9-tailed fox's chakra, thereby greatly weakening the power of the 8 trigram seal, or even completely unlocking it. To weaken the 8 trigram seal, before I become a perfect Jinchuriki, only others can do it. Where's your seal? Here. Kushina pointed to her stomach. Shikato reached out. Kushina immediately dodged. Hey, Shikato, what are you doing? I'm a married woman. Are you poisonous? I want to see your bagua seal. Oh, you scared me. I thought you had improper thoughts about me. No, sister treats you as a younger brother. Shikato's forward vein jumped. Seeing this, Kushina hurried to make amends. I was kidding. I'll shut up immediately. Lifting a corner of Kushina's clothes, she revealed her white and smooth belly, on which a swirling bagua inscription was drawn in black tadpole script. Shikato frowned. Kushina's bagua seal was not exactly the same as the bagua seal he learned from the roots. Originally, the bagua seal was composed of 2 4-symbol seals, but the bagua seal on Kushina's belly had been improved in many places. With Shikato's elementary seal skills, of course he couldn't do this. Although he had learned the 8 trigram seal, he only learned it at the elementary level. Shikato raised his hand, and the chakra began to gather at his fingertips. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. 5 elements, 8 trigrams. Kushina was extremely surprised. You're lying. You obviously know the 8 trigram seal. Shikato glared at her. Shut up. Kushina subconsciously put her hand over her mouth, then reacted and immediately glared at Shikato with dissatisfaction. This guy is just lazy. As long as he can let others do it, he doesn't want to do it at all. 5 elements, 8 trigram seal. Shikato put his hand on Kushina's belly. He didn't dare to use chakra. He had to control the degree of weakening. This was a very delicate job. At least with his proficiency in seal skills, he had to be careful. Kushina suddenly puffed. Oh, it's so itchy. She shivered, and almost made Shikato's careful seal release slip and slip to another place. Shikato was a little angry. Uzumaki Kushina. Kushina immediately looked apologetic. I was wrong. I won't move. The process of removing the seal was not too short, because Shikato was not proficient enough, so he could only be careful. After a moment, Shikato withdrew his hand and took a closer look at the remaining bagua seal. This should be enough. Kushina also praised. Not bad. You still said you can't do it. You are really a shut up. Oh, Kushina subconsciously covered her mouth, then reacted and glared at Shikato again. Shikato ignored her and stood up and said, let's go, let's try it. Shikato's method of weakening the bagua seal was far less proficient than Minato Namikaze's, and it was not as accurate as his weakening. Minato's weakened bagua seal, if it is controlled to 4 tails, the 9 tails can't even think of having one more. Shikato's method is not familiar, and if Kushina goes crazy, it may reach the level of the 7th tail, but even so, it is not a big problem. 7 tails can still be suppressed. Chapter 56 Cruel 9 Tails. The location is still in the valley in the uninhabited area, but the people responsible for supporting the barrier have changed from the 3 families of Ino, Shika and Johto barrier team of the ANBU, the direct guard of the Hokage. Jiraiya was also called in. After all, it was the first attempt to increase the strength of the weakening of the 8 trigram seal, and it reached the 6-tailed beast at one time, which was a bit risky, so it was safer to call Jiraiya to be a backup for unexpected events. In fact, Shikato did not think that Kushina could really succeed. She grew up in a completely different environment from other Jinchuriki. As the 9-tailed Jinchuriki, Kushina was only known to a few people since she was a child. In addition, the perfection of the 8 trigram seal was close to perfection, which led to her almost never going berserk. Therefore, Kushina had never encountered the kind of bad environment that ordinary Jinchuriki hated, so naturally she could not understand each other with a tailed beast in her body. Without this process as a foreshadowing, it would be even more difficult to obtain the recognition of the tailed beast in the future, and it would be almost impossible to succeed just by hard work. However, Shikato did not hit Kushina, just trying a few more times. There is always a time to give up. As expected, during the training of the perfect Jinchuriki, Kushina went berserk again. 1, 2, a total of 6 scarlet tails appeared. Extremely violent chakra swept in all directions like a storm. In the state of the 6-tailed beast, Kurama was extremely excited. The 4-tailed beast had been punched countless times by Dearman before, and it gnashed its teeth in pain. It was finally time for revenge. How could it not be excited? Kurama was so excited that he was almost shaking all over. Little devil, I will tear you apart. Wail, wail, wail in pain. This will be an extremely cruel beating. In the state of the 6-tailed beast, Kurama kept roaring. Dearman didn't quite understand what the 9-tailed beast was doing. It kept roaring at him, but never launched an attack. I don't understand animal language. Can you speak human language? Forget it, let's make a quick decision. So, a very cruel beating began in Kurama's words, and the process was like this. Do you accept it? Roar, bang. Submit or not, roar, bang. Submit or not, roar, bang bang. Submit or not, roar bang bang bang. Submit or not, roar, oh bang. Hey, no, you just said you submit? Oh, Kurama was so frustrated. He was a great fox demon, but he howled like a wolf. His domineering voice was almost hoarse. I submit? Why the hell are you still fighting? Don't get close to me. Get out of here. Anyway, it's not the first time that it's been bad. From the 3rd punch, it gave in on the spot. The big-tailed beast can bend and stretch. But this ninja is simply outrageous. He will fight even if he doesn't submit. You wait, I'll find an opportunity to come out, and I'll bite you to death first. After Shikato solved the problem, the ANBU and Jiraiya who were in charge of the barrier technique outside the field were dumbfounded. The runaway Jinchuriki in the state of the 6 tails was beaten into a muggle. So much so that after reinforcing the seal of the 8 trigrams, Kushina looked at Shikato with a rather unfriendly look after she regained consciousness. Although Shikato helped suppress the runaway 9 tails, the effect was unexpectedly good. But the pain was really all over my body. Doesn't this kid know how to hold back at all? I don't know how many punches he took all over my body, it felt like it was falling apart. However, there was also the damage caused by the tailed beast transformation, which was a little difficult for even the physique of the Uzumaki clan to bear. Shikato rarely showed concern. Are you okay? Kushina rolled her eyes. You know you care about me. Please be gentler next time. Shikato, oh, you can still complain. It seems you are fine. Then I'll leave first. Smelly boy, can't you give me a hand? I can't stand up. Really? Humph, pull me if you want. Oh, hey, why are you leaving? Didn't you say so? Do you understand women? You're so annoying. Smelly boy. I'm going to bite you to death. Halfway through her words, Kushina saw the hand in front of her. She looked up at Shikato, and seeing his serious and calm eyes, she couldn't help but feel warm in her heart. This guy still cares about people. Shikato pulled Kushina up, but she seemed to be really injured. The 6-tail transformation had damaged her body quite a bit, and Shikato's random punches were finally reflected on Kushina. Although she acted carefree and seemed to be fine, she still stumbled and fell down when she stood up. Shikato supported her and said with some embarrassment, how about we let the ANBU take you back? In Kushina's state, it really didn't look like she could go back by herself. Kushina shook her head firmly. No, I can do it myself. Then she took 2 steps and almost fell to the ground again. Shikato had no choice but to bend down. Come on, I'll carry you back. Don't act so pitiful. Kushina happily propped herself up, climbed onto Shikato's back, and then hugged his neck happily. Hey, Shikato, seriously. Do you need a sister? Don't talk nonsense. I'll throw you down if you talk nonsense again. How about when Minato and I have a child in the future, let him call you godfather, okay? Shikato's forehead was bulging with veins when he heard this. This damn godfather, I hope you give birth to a boy. Kushina seemed to be weak and began to chatter non-stop. When I was a child, I always hated fate. I always felt that it was against me, making me leave my hometown at such a young age and become Konoha's Jinchuriki. It was not until I met Minato that I was somewhat grateful to fate. He saved me, just like my peerless hero. And now, my dream of having a younger brother seems to be coming true. It must be very interesting to have a sister. Fate, sometimes it is really wonderful. Shikato did not speak. Fate? Maybe. When Minato saved Kushina, let alone the fact that Minato had just become a Jonin and defeated several Kumagakure Jonin, just think of him as a gifted person. But it was too outrageous that the Kumagakure ninja could almost tie up the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki from the core area of Konoha without making a sound and taking him out of the Konoha ninja village. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and the village is protected by a barrier. To kidnap the Jinchuriki in this situation, it must be an elite ninja, and several such elite ninjas were defeated by a Jonin almost without any injury. Rather than saying it is fate, it is better to say that someone is controlling fate and artificially creating bonds. Otherwise, it is really hard to explain. The man named Six Path Sage, if there is a chance in the future. I really want to meet him. The chattering behind him has become smaller and smaller. After Shikato felt it, he looked back slightly. Kushina was closing her eyes, lying on his shoulder, and fell asleep in a dream of a beautiful future. She slept very sweetly, and the corners of her eyes seemed to be filled with a happy light. Shikato didn't know why, but he became more and more silent. May she have a good dream. In the distance, Jiraiya watched Shikato carrying Kushina back, and he was also a little sad. The woman he likes, his apprentice's wife, these people who are very important to him, but without exception, all have a very good relationship with Nara Shikato. This is very distressing. After all, he really can't stand Nara Shikato's character. The two have obvious differences in their three views. And this guy seems to have a grudge against him, always finding ways to attack him. Jiraiya sighed and felt worried. He didn't know that the three disciples he accepted in the Rain Country in the early years also had a good relationship with Shikato, otherwise he would be even more worried. Chapter 57, The Dawn of Promotion. In the next month or so, Kushina has been trying to practice the perfect Jinchuriki. In the wind and rain, she has never slacked off. This almost desperate persistence, in the eyes of Shikato, is completely meaningless. But miracles often happen quietly. Because Kushina actually succeeded. She became another perfect Jinchuriki in the ninja world, slightly inferior to Killer Bee of the Land of Thunder and the fourth Mizuka Jagara of the Land of Water. She is the third perfect Jinchuriki in the entire ninja world in the true sense. As for the reason for her success, it may be that Kushina's persistence for more than a month has moved the Nine-Tails. But it is more likely that Shikato's persistence for more than a month moved the Nine-Tails. The Nine-Tails couldn't bear it anymore and vowed to beat a certain bastard violently, even if it was beaten to death. But with the number of tails limited, it really couldn't beat it. And since the ordinary way can't get out and the strength has been limited, it can only change to an alternative way. So the Nine-Tails, who was lying flat and sick of it, simply agreed to Kushina. Because this man and this beast have a common goal, to beat up Nara Shikato. Anyone who gets beaten up every day will get annoyed. Even though Kushina knew that Shikato was helping her, she couldn't stand being beaten up every day. She wanted to try to beat Shikato up once in return, and see if it was really satisfying. Aren't younger brothers there to be bullied by their older sisters? Beating up younger brothers is fun to think about. Kurama also agreed with this. I am the great nine-tailed fox, but I have been beaten up by the same person for so long. Who wouldn't be angry? Oh, my little temper. Kurama gritted his teeth and wanted to retaliate. So the man and the beast reached a strategic alliance, and with a common topic, everything was easy to talk about, it just required repeated running in. In the last practice, Kushina suddenly changed her sitting posture, stood up, and looked directly at Shikato. Shikato was ready to stretch his muscles on the side, and when he saw this, he said, "What's wrong?" "Can't wait." Kushina looked at it and suddenly laughed. "Shikato, it's my turn this time. She said something inexplicable. The next moment, Kushina's whole body suddenly appeared with a golden chakra coat, 2 golden fox ears popped out of her head, a circle of black magatama was around her neck, and a vortex of black lines was outlined on her belly, extending all the way to her waist and abdomen. Nine-tail mode? Shikato was stunned for a moment. Is it really successful? This shouldn't be the case. With Kushina's past as a Jinchuriki, she is incomparable to other Jinchuriki. It can be said that she is extremely happy. This situation should be impossible to communicate with a hot-tempered nine-tail. Is this okay? Forget it, it's good to succeed, so I can save my god. Shikato just relaxed, a flash of golden light flashed by, reaching the extreme speed, and rushed straight to his face. Armament Haki bang! Shikato had no time to dodge, and could only wrap up the Armament Haki in a hurry. But the whole person was still knocked out by the golden fist. In mid-air, the deer man twisted his body forcibly, turned over and landed safely. He rubbed his slightly sour nose, and the domineering power was still a little hasty. He looked at Kushina behind him with a dark face. Kushina, what the hell are you doing? Kushina laughed and said, Dear man, I have been beaten by you for so long, it's my turn this time. Dear man raised his eyebrows. So that's how it is. No wonder the practice is successful. It seems that they have found the same target. Bang! Kushina fell to the ground exhausted. No, Kurama, I have no strength at all. Kurama in the golden chakra form was squatting beside her. It still had a lot of strength, but it was useless. The opponent stood still and let them, one man and one beast, fight as hard as they could. In the end, they were the ones who were exhausted. Kurama shook his big head and looked at Dearman. Is this guy really a human? How could this happen? It looked down at Kushina. Use the tail beast ball, Kushina. Otherwise, no matter how fast we are, it will be useless. He is too hard. Kushina was stunned, and then smiled awkwardly. Will the tail beast ball be too dangerous? It will not be good if it hurts Dearman. Kurama was annoyed when he heard it. I knew that you and I are not of the same mind. We can't hurt him even if we die of exhaustion with fists. You really didn't want to do anything to him. Kushina, you disappoint me so much. Play by yourself. I'm leaving. After that, Kurama went back into Kushina's body and started to have a bad temper. The nine tails chakra on Kushina's body surface also quickly faded. However, both parties have passed the stage of mutual recognition, so as long as Kushina coaxes it in the future, it will be fine. Dearman stood not far away, and the whole person seemed to be in a daze. Because he found that there was something abnormal in the column of data presented by the health system. Haki, Armament Haki, top, 99% plus, Observation Haki, primary, 29%, Conqueror Haki, not yet enabled. Behind the data of Armament Haki, at some point, the black and white plus sign that was originally unclickable actually lit up. The digitized plus sign lit up again, meaning that Armament Haki can continue to upgrade. Armament Haki with a top 99% progress can actually continue to upgrade. This has to be said to be a huge surprise. Ever since the head-on confrontation with the tailed beasts, especially after the battle with the 8 Tails Jinchuriki Killer Bee, Shikato felt that the hardness of Armament Haki still needs to be improved. Even the tailed beast ball cannot be taken without injury. What kind of Haki is this? Shikato's ultimate goal is to eat the truth-seeking ball as candy, and the tailed beast ball is nothing. Shikato felt quite sorry that he had not been able to upgrade before, but he did not expect the surprise to come so suddenly. Previously, when Kushina was in Nine Tails mode, the speed of the instant body technique was too fast for him to react, so Shikato simply stood still and let her do it. This saves trouble. It was also during that gap that Shikato took a quick glance and found that the plus sign behind the Armament Haki was gradually getting brighter. With Kushina's attack, the plus sign became brighter and brighter. Later, he tried it and could also make the plus sign brighter when he attacked. This means that the top 99% Armament Haki, if you want to improve it, it is no longer dependent on health points. Instead, it depends on fighting, continuous attack and defense to continue to improve Armament Haki. Thinking about it carefully, the plus behind the Armament Haki really started to brighten after the battle with the 8 Tails Jinchuriki. It seems that because of that heavy blow, the new promotion conditions for Armament Haki were met. However, after the 3 battles, Shikato rarely fought with others in the true sense, so he never paid much attention to this. It was not until this time when he helped Kushina practice the perfect Jinchuriki that he really noticed that the plus sign was no longer black and white without knowing it. Shikato tried to click it, but there was still no response. It looks like it hasn't completely brightened up yet, and it still needs a little polishing time. Chapter 58, Advancement of Armament Haki. So the dear man looked at Kushina impatiently. Kushina, what's wrong? Use the tailed beast J to attack me. I said use the tailed beast J to attack me. Kushina propped herself up and stood up. Her recovery speed was extremely fast. Rather than being a member of the Uzumaki clan, her physique was a bit like that of the Senju clan. It can only be said that the Senju and the Uzumaki clan are indeed distant relatives. The chakra code of the Nine Tails mode has automatically emerged on Kushina's body surface. The golden Kurama has jumped out impatiently. Kushina, why are you still being polite to him now? He was the one who asked us to use the tailed beast Jade, let him do it. Kushina ignored it and stared at the dear man. Dear man, are you sure your mental state is normal? Did you eat something that damaged your brain when you had breakfast this morning? Just use it if I tell you to. Why are you talking so much nonsense? You eat brains when you have meals. Kushina was taught a lesson and gnashed her teeth secretly. Brat, you don't appreciate it at all. Kurama was so excited. He just liked your tough look. Haha. Hurry up, Kushina, or he might regret it later. Kushina was still a little hesitant. Are you sure? Sure. Kurama nodded repeatedly. I asked him, he is sure too. He has no problem. We have to believe him. Kurama looked like he was a close friend of Shikato and agreed quickly for him. He seemed to be afraid that Shikato would change his mind. Shikato waved. Come on. Kushina and Kurama looked at each other and nodded. Then the human form of the Nine Tails instantly became huge and turned into golden beast form. For the first tailed beast ball, Kushina deliberately restrained most of the power. Although Kurama was a little unhappy, he didn't say anything. The black and purple energy beam hit Shikato's palm, as if a firework was set off. Shikato's eyelids jumped. The power was a bit too strong. The plus behind the Armament Haki remained almost unchanged. This made Shikato very dissatisfied. Try harder, Kushina, haven't you eaten? In the beast form, Kushina's face darkened, while Kurama's eyes lit up. It's this little temper, I just like your little temper, it's just right. Soon, a normal-tailed beast ball rushed in. The black and purple energy beam instantly submerged Shikato, plowing a long scorched gully in the land between the valleys, stretching all the way to the sea level in the distance. Finally, a sky full of waves exploded. Shikato noticed that the plus of the Armament Haki really brightened up again. He didn't care about the slight injury caused by the tailed beast ball at all, and his expression became excited. Come again. Kushina was also extremely shocked. She took a tailed beast ball head-on, but she looked intact. How did she do that? After hearing Shikato's words, she felt a little relieved and directly fired a tailed beast ball instantly. Come again. Come again. Come again. Come again. After nearly 25 tailed beast balls, Shikato was so excited that he seemed to be trembling a little, completely ignoring the wounds on his body that were already bleeding. Armament Haki, top, 99% plus, gently clicked the plus sign, and the next moment, Shikato felt excruciating pain all over his body. His face immediately turned dark, and he gritted his teeth tightly, with cold sweat oozing from his forehead. The sudden intense pain did not come from the injuries on his body, but from the tendons, membranes, bones, and flesh, as if they were constantly being hammered by a hammer. With Shikato's strong endurance, he almost fainted on the spot. Kushina rushed over with some concern, and just when she was about to check the situation, Kurama suddenly stopped her. Don't touch him. Kushina, this guy seems to be evolving? What a joke. Can this kind of monster evolve? Kurama was stunned and couldn't help but scream. You've already eaten the tailed beast ball, and you can still evolve? Are you the tailed beast or am I the tailed beast? After a long while, the severe pain in Shikato's body finally subsided, and he breathed a sigh of relief. After stretching his muscles and bones a little, his whole body immediately cracked, and the outer garment on his upper body suddenly broke. Kushina was stunned. Shikato? You seem to have grown taller. Shikato's height was less than 1.8 meters before, a little taller than Kushina, but not much. Now he has directly reached 1.88 meters, about a head taller than Kushina. After the shirt collapsed, the upper body exposed was even more perfectly proportioned. The tendons, bones, and flesh fit tightly together, and the 8 abdominal muscles were like cast iron, presenting an extreme visual impact. Especially at this moment, the large and small wounds on his body were still bleeding, dyeing half of that eye-catching body red. In addition, the facial lines at this time were also sharpened, making his temperament more prominent. When Shikato narrowed his phoenix eyes, even Kushina, who is already a married woman, couldn't help swallowing her saliva. Damn, this brother is a little too charming. Unlike her, Shikato's eyes were fixed on a certain line in the data. Armament Haki, exceptional, 100%. The top-level Armament Haki has finally been promoted to the exceptional level. The changes brought about are not only the improvement of Haki, but also a huge leap in physical fitness. Although his physical skills are still at the elementary level of 29%, it does not mean that his physical fitness is still the same. He can clearly feel that his body has become lighter, faster, stronger, and better balanced. Especially the dynamic vision, everything in his eyes seems to be slowing down, and the speed of dynamic capture is amazingly fast. Kushina, do the tailed beast ball again. Kushina, hey, Shikato called 3 times in a row before calling Kushina back from her distraction. She was a little embarrassed. This brother has really changed too much in a short period of time. After hearing what Shikato said, Kushina came back to her senses and immediately frowned. Shikato, although I don't know what happened to you, your current condition is already very bad. I won't try to you again. What you need now is a quiet rest. Shikato didn't say anything. Because in fact, it was true. He had eaten more than 20 tailed beast balls, which was only slightly better than the one with the 8-tailed killer bee. Because Kushina had always controlled the scale of the tailed beast balls, she was not seriously injured, but she was also seriously injured after eating them. It was just that Shikato couldn't suppress the excitement in his body, but seeing that Kushina had determined not to cooperate, he had no choice but to give up. Kurama also curiously turned into Golden Demon Fox, pulled out a chakra coat, jumped on Shikato's head, and grabbed his hair curiously. Are you really a human, bastard? How can there be someone like you? Compared with me, you are more like a tailed beast. As he spoke, he knocked on Shikato's head. Shikato didn't care about it. Kurama, Kushina grabbed him back helplessly. She glanced at Shikato, who had changed into new coat, and said, let's go back. Kurama was a little unhappy that his wish to teach Shikato a lesson was not fulfilled, but Shikato was too tough. He could still jump around after being hit by more than 20 tailed beast balls. This made him helpless. He felt that he would never be able to avenge the 9-tailed fox in this life. Damn it. Chapter 59, Conspiracy and Traps. Shikato thought that since Kushina had completed the training of the perfect Jinchuriki and the village had entered a period of rest and recuperation, he should have a lot of free time. But the next day, the root suddenly came to his door. Kabuto, wearing a root mask, stood in front of Shikato and handed him a scroll. Senior, Danzo has a mission for you. Shikato took the scroll, opened it and flipped through it. The more he looked, the more he felt a little strange. Usually, when Danzo came to him, he would come in person, and the missions were mostly difficult. But this time, the mission was just an ordinary support mission, to pick up a root spy who escaped from the land of lightning. If necessary, he could directly kill the other party. This mission was not too difficult. Is it really necessary for him to do this kind of small mission in person? Shikato was a little confused. However, since the 4th generation Namokaze Minato came to power and the ninja world entered a peaceful period, Shikato and Danzo's honeymoon period of mutual use has almost ended. Now he is more demanding and not as indulgent as before, which is understandable. Moreover, the scroll did have Danzo's secret hand seals, which should not be fake. Moreover, during this period, Shikato had been accompanying Kushina in the training of the perfect Jinchuriki. Danzo knew this, but he never made trouble for him. So Shikato was very considerate this time. Gia seemed to see that Shikato was not in a very good condition. Senior, are you injured? It's okay. Shikato's injury was not serious, and he had an extraordinary level of armed color. There were very few people who could threaten him, and even fewer in peacetime. The location for this mission was located in the border area of the Land of Fire near the Land of Lightning. When Shikato set off, he noticed that Gia had actually followed him. Gia took the initiative to explain, Senior, Danzo asked me to cooperate with your operation this time. Shikato didn't think much about it. Whatever, as long as you can keep up. His physical fitness had taken a leap forward, and his pace was obviously faster. Jiraiya saw the deer man disappear in a flash and disappear directly into the jungle. He was surprised. Strange, isn't speed his weakness? When did he become so fast? The deer man was running at full speed in front, but what surprised him was that Jiraiya was actually far behind. Although he followed a little reluctantly, he did catch up. He didn't have a clear definition of his own speed, but it shouldn't be so fast that a 10-year-old child could keep up, right? Can we say that Jiraiya is worthy of being a wood escape master carefully cultivated by Danzo? Soon, the deer man arrived at a meeting point, which was the core area of a border jungle. The surrounding trees were lush, but after careful perception, no other people's breath was found here. This made the deer man raise his eyebrows. Suddenly, a black shadow jumped down from a tree not far away and rushed straight towards the deer man. The deer man was a little surprised. He clearly didn't feel that there were other people. The illusion should be ineffective against him. So where did this person come from? A sense of weirdness rose in the deer man's heart. He took a quick glance and noticed that the attacker was wearing a Konoha forehead protector, which immediately made the weird feeling stronger. The small sword chopped in the forehead of the deer man, making a clanging sound. The deer man grabbed the attacker's face with his backhand, exerted force with his arm, and suddenly knocked him to the ground. His 5 fingers gradually pinched together and said coldly, "Who are you?" The attacker's blue pupils opened wide through his fingers, but the corners of his mouth suddenly opened and he let out a strange laugh. He formed a seal with both hands. Explosion. The attacker's whole body swelled and expanded instantly. The next second, he completely exploded, exploding into blood mist. The terrifying explosion wave blasted a large area of the jungle into ruins. Debris, dust, meat, and blood were everywhere, and the Konoha forehead protector rolled quietly not far away. The deer man had armed color and was not injured, but his body was mostly stained red by the opponent's blood. He frowned tightly, then turned his head suddenly and stared at Jiraiya, who had just caught up. Jiraiya seemed a little surprised. "Senior, what happened here?" Shikato didn't say anything, but stared at him for a moment, then turned his head again and looked at a corpse buried deep in the ground in the distance, which was exposed by the huge vibration of the explosion. Shikato stepped forward and took a look. The face of the corpse was already cut to pieces, and it was impossible to tell who it was. A small sword was stuck in the chest, the abdomen was cut open, the left and right arms were broken, the right leg was broken, and the left leg was twisted. This person must have been tortured extremely cruelly before he died, and was finally killed by a knife. Looking at the wounds on his body, they were all new wounds, and it was obvious that he had just died. "Is there anyone else here?" Shikato's face sank, and he looked around, but he didn't find any traces or breath of other people. He realized that something was wrong with the current situation, and just as he was about to evacuate here, he sensed 7 figures flashing in the distance. Swish. Conventional Konoha ninja uniforms, one of whom was also wearing the uniform of the Uchiha police force. There were 7 people in total. Judging from their aura, most of them should be the last Jonin or special Jonin left in Konoha. 4 ANBU teams and 3 Jonin teams. Shikato frowned even more. Suddenly, he turned his head sharply and looked in a direction in the distance. There was a person's aura emerging silently, just like the previous attacker, as if he appeared out of thin air. Sarutobi Goto appeared with blood all over his body. He seemed to be covered with wounds everywhere, and he looked extremely miserable. Then he hurriedly ran towards the Konoha ninjas, shouting in panic, "Save me, please save me. That scum is crazy. He killed Shinosuke and Fuji-I. That scum is crazy. He is crazy." Shikato was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes seemed to be covered with ashes in an instant, and he muttered to himself in a suppressed and low voice, "Forgive me, why is it you again? What the hell are you doing this time? It's endless, it's so disgusting, cub." Shikato lowered his head and kept suppressing his growing anger. Sarutobi Goto's drama continued. His panicked shouting made the 7 people who came over change their faces. Especially one of the female ANBU ninjas, her whole body trembled violently. Tachibana Taki grabbed Sarutobi Goto and cried out in a lost voice, "Who are you talking about? Brother Goto? Who did you just say was killed?" Their ANBU team and the Jonin squad were dispatched at the same time because they received an urgent message for help from Sarutobi Shinosuke. Shinosuke seemed to have encountered a huge crisis in the border area and only had time to send a very short message for help. Then there was no other movement, and there was not even a little bit of specific situation to explain, and everything came to an abrupt end. So much so that when they rushed here in a hurry, they still had some fluke mentality. It was not until Sarutobi Goto rushed out and shouted that sentence that everyone present felt heavy. In order not to affect the viewing experience, today's 2 chapters will be posted consecutively, so the noon chapters are gone. Chapter 60 Spread Your Wings and Fly. Sarutobi Goto seemed to be extremely scared. He pointed at the scarred corpse and the ruins in the distance, and then pointed at the deer man standing there with his head down. Shinosuke. Shinosuke was attacked by the scum Nara Shikato and then brutally killed. He tortured Shinosuke severely. He is not a human being, but a devil. When he said this, he even squeezed out a few tears that seemed to be afraid and sad. Tachibana Taki is the fiancée of Sarutobi Shinosuke, and the mother of Sarutobi Konohamaru in the original work. It's just that the two have not yet married at this time, but their relationship is very good. They are engaged and are ready to get married after this busy period. She is even ready to retire from the ninja army after getting married. As a result, he suddenly heard such a bad news, which made Tachibana Taki almost collapse on the spot. Looking in the direction pointed by Sarutobi Goto, at the edge of the scorched ruins, a scarred corpse was lying there. The corpse was so miserable that Taki couldn't bear to watch it any longer. She was trembling all over, but she still walked stubbornly and tremblingly, and finally stared at the lifeless corpse on the ground without moving. Even though his face was unrecognizable and his body was in tatters. But from some features on his clothes and body, she instantly confirmed the identity of Shinosuke. Because she was so familiar with him, this was the man who was supposed to be her, the man who was the head of the family. Shinosuke, dead. In an instant, she was filled with grief, and tears could not stop flowing down. Even with a mask on her face, tears still slid down her chin. Then in the next moment, Taki disappeared from the spot. A residual image appeared behind the deer man. Asshole. You go to hell. With an extremely angry roar, Taki drew his sword out of its sheath, and the small sword cut a little cold light. The tip of the knife fell on the deer man's neck, vowing to cut off his head with one knife. The deer man did not even turn his head. Instead, the black shadow on the ground floated up like a ghost. A dark Bigfoot stretched out from the shadow and kicked Tachibana Taki in the waist and abdomen. Bang! Tachibana Taki spit out a mouthful of blood and fell out, and the small sword fell to the ground. The deer man turned his head, and his dark pupils were now full of haze, shrinking like needles, and his sharp eyes stared at Tachibana Taki. Except for your father and your mother, no one will take your pain kindly. So, don't show off your disgusting desire for revenge in front of me. Be careful, I will kill you. Tachibana Taki's face was still covered with tears, and although the corners of his mouth were bleeding, there was no fear in the pupils under the mask. You killed Shinosuke. I will never let you go. At this time, the others finally reacted. It was really that the series of changes just now came too fast and too unexpected. Someone immediately shouted at Shikato, Nara Shikato. You betrayed the Konoha ninja village. Give up, Nara Shikato. You assassinated your colleagues with such cruel means. Nara Shikato, you are really a scumbag. Harsh shouts and scoldings continued to be heard. Shikato half closed his eyes, his mood fluctuating. He tried his best to control his emotions, but he still couldn't hide the anger that kept growing. His narrow and long phoenix eyes were already filled with anger and awe-inspiring murderous intent, and he glanced over. The group of people who had just been scolding him all swallowed their saliva involuntarily and sweated profusely. In an instant, everyone stopped breathing. The huge malice like a mountain made them, as elites, feel cold with fear. Deerman took a deep breath, slowly suppressed his fierceness, and said in a low voice, when I came, he was already a corpse. And I was also attacked by another suicide. If you don't believe me, you can ask A. The group looked at each other, not knowing whether to believe Deerman or Sarutobi Goto. So they subconsciously looked at the masked root boy in the distance. Gia opened his big dark eyes, unblinking like a ghost. I don't know. Senior, I came here because Danzo asked me to find you. He asked me to warn you that no matter what conflicts there are, you must never attack the ninjas in the village, especially Sarutobi Shinosuke. What did you say? The pupils of the deer man suddenly contracted, and the overflowing armed color instantly rendered his whole body. The ground collapsed into a deep pit with a bang. The deer man stood in it, staring at Gia with his dark pupils, and said word by word, "You are not Gia." Gia touched the mask innocently. What are you talking about, senior? You can't deny me just because I told the truth and didn't testify for you unconditionally. This is not good. Hiss, what a scary malice. Is this the Nara deer man? The corners of the deer man's mouth showed a cruel smile, and the malice in his heart was expanding without limit. But soon he suppressed it again. No, if he did it this way, it would be exactly what he wanted. There was something strange about this. Even if Danzo wanted to do something to him, he couldn't kill Sarutobi Shinosuke. Besides, Danzo wouldn't have a falling out with Shikato right now. There was no obvious conflict between the two. So the problem was with Jiraiya, and Sarutobi Goto and the previous attackers were hiding too much, without leaking any of their aura. Shikato took a deep breath and kept reminding himself to consider the overall situation and be patient for the time being. As long as he returned to the village, he would definitely find a way to find out the people behind this strange thing one by one. Now is not the time for the third generation to be in power. With the fourth generation Namikaze Minato taking office, the three families of Ino, Shikoku and Cho are gradually gathering a lot of power. Shikato has enough confidence that as long as he goes back, he will be able to explain it clearly. Since someone has done this, the traces can never be completely wiped out. After Shikato calmed down again, the others present were more or less relieved from the terrifying pressure. Ever since the moment that Dearman suddenly burst out with that malicious intent, almost everyone had only one feeling. That was that he was not far from death. He was really not far from death, as if someone had pinched his throat and he couldn't breathe. The strong malicious intent rushed in, suffocating people. Now that Dearman had calmed down, he should be ready to surrender, which made them all relax a little. Tachibana Taki struggled to get up from the ground, and his pupils under the mask still revealed a deep hatred. Scum, you will definitely die without a complete corpse, I curse you. Dearman took a deep breath and ignored it. Others didn't say anything disgusting, but they all felt a little heavy. But Sarutobi Goto, who had been pretending to be a victim, mouthed to Dearman from an angle that others couldn't see. Nara Dearman, I will definitely kill you. Dearman noticed it, so he was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly laughed, and laughed happily. Ha ha ha. This scene made everyone else a little puzzled. What happened again? Is this guy crazy? After laughing wantonly, the deer man gradually narrowed his phoenix eyes, and uttered a long-lost Chinese curse with murderous intent. Fuck. Fuck your overall situation. Tomorrow, the update time will be adjusted, with one chapter around 12 noon and one chapter around 10 p.m. The data is a bit bad, but I will continue to work hard. Chapter 61 The Attacking Eagle. The next second, accompanied by the national curse. The deer man had already bent his legs, and the armed collar was wrapped around him. Boom. A huge sound like thunder resounded through the jungle. The ground, with the deer man's foothold as the core, cracked and collapsed in a spider web, and spread out in all directions on a large scale, with dust flying. Under the fierce force of the recoil, the deer man's speed reached an extreme. Almost in an instant, he had arrived in front of Sarutobi Goto. Raise your arms, raise your hands, and swing your fists, flowing like clouds and water, all in one go. There were visible black lightning arcs between the fist bones, which were splashed out by the naked eye. It was the overflow of the extraordinary armed color domineering. Sarutobi Goto had no time to react at all, and a touch of fear just appeared on his face. Boom. Another thunder-like explosion. Sarutobi Goto's entire upper body completely disappeared, without leaving any trace. At the same time, behind his original body, a huge fist mark as big as a hill appeared on the ground. Within the range of the fist mark, trees turned to ashes, and flying rocks were smashed into powder. The huge fist mark was deeply imprinted in the ground, like a sinkhole left by a prehistoric giant beast. The deer man looked at the legs that were only left below the waist, and the haze in his eyes dissipated a little, and then he stared at Jiraiya. Tell me, I'm very curious about you. You can disguise so realistically, from the body to the chakra, completely consistent. In my impression, there is only one thing that can do it, a thing called White Zetsu. White Zetsu's disguise technique is the strongest transformation technique that even the Byakugan cannot distinguish. Thinking of this, the deer man's eyes became more and more full of hostility. Ha, bastards, I haven't provoked you yet, but you took the initiative to come to my door. Are you having a lot of fun? Then keep having fun. Shikato's deep eyes stared at him. I'll just play with you guys. Stared at by Shikato's cold eyes, Jiraiya felt the pressure on his body increase dramatically. Senior, I don't understand what you are talking about, but it's hard for me to be kind to you in your current state, so I will fight back next. It was not until this time that the other Konoha ninjas came back to their senses from the shock of Shikato killing Sarutobi Goto with one punch. It was really that the punch was too outrageous, and the roaring noise was still in my ears. Nara Shikato. You dared to kill your colleagues in public, you are too arrogant, you are corrupt. Nara, it turned out that you killed Shinosuke. I want you to pay with your life. Tachibana Taki was the most radical one. Almost without any hesitation, he split into two clones and rushed up again with the instant body technique. Konoha-style swordsmanship, 3-day moon dance. 3 small swords chopped down at the same time from 3 fatal angles. What a gimmick, Dearman sneered, raised his hand and waved to disperse the 2 clones, and finally grabbed Tachibana Taki's slender neck in midair. Nara. Let go of Taki, Nara Dearman. Shouts came one after another, but no one dared to get close. On the one hand, they were worried about angering Nara Dearman and taking ruthless action against Tachibana Taki, and on the other hand, they felt an inexplicable fear in their hearts. Dearman's eyes were filled with indifference. He used his 5 fingers to strangle Tachibana Taki's neck on the spot in the side of her anger and fear. Blood flowed from the corners of her mouth, and Tachibana Taki stopped struggling. She dropped her hands weakly, and her pupils began to dilate. Seeing this, the others were all furious. If Sarutobi Goto was not very popular because of his character, Tachibana Taki was one of those people with good relationships. Dearman's attack on Tachibana Taki completely dispelled the last bit of luck in everyone's hearts. Nara Shikarin is crazy. He can't turn back. Shikarin was going to continue, but when he noticed Jia's small move of quietly retreating to the back, he immediately changed his target. Humph! He blew a breath from his nose, threw Tachibana Taki's body away, and rushed towards Jia at full speed. The ground was cracked by him again, and his figure was like a rocket, with a very fast recoil speed, almost catching up with Jia in the blink of an eye. Jia has been paying attention to Shikarin's movements, and when he saw the vague black shadow catching up behind him, he was also terrified. He paused, turned his body immediately, adjusted the direction and fled again. As for what he said before about counterattack, of course it was a lie. This guy is so scary, I won't stay and wait to die. Jia has noticed that although Shikarin's speed is very fast, it has not reached the outrageous level of Namake's Minato and AI. However, his straight sprint is quite amazing because he can use the terrifying rebound force of the ground. Therefore, as long as you avoid running in a straight line, it won't be too easy for him to catch up. Dearman was indeed disgusted, and he rushed out for a long distance before stopping. The haze in his eyes suddenly deepened, and he used the force to sprint again. This time he restrained some of his strength, and after catching up for a long distance, he began to chase after Jia with his superior physical fitness. However, he soon found something wrong. Jia's speed was ridiculously fast, and he barely closed the distance after chasing for several times. Is White Zetsu so strong? In Dearman's impression, White Zetsu is just cannon fodder on the battlefield. Apart from the fact that his transformation technique has almost no flaws, he doesn't have much advantage. How come this thing in front of him runs so fast? Dearman suddenly stopped. Jia seemed to have noticed something and stopped too. Senior, are you not chasing me anymore? You don't seem to be very good. Dearman took a deep breath, raised his hand in the air, and used his finger as a gun. Jia was confused. What does this mean? Dearman half squinted and said nothing. The distance is a bit far, and the effect of the Armament Haki is not great. The shadow must be used to extend the attack distance. Armament Haki, entanglement. Yin escape, shadow manipulation technique, finger gun. A black dot appeared at the tip of the Dearman's finger. The next second, the black dot suddenly stretched into a long black line, running across the front and back. At an extremely fast speed, the black line instantly appeared in front of Jia's face. Wrapped in armed color, the black line exerted a terrifying penetrating force. Jia's face changed drastically. Instant body technique. As soon as Jia's figure landed, he was shocked to find that the black line turned a corner and still caught up with him. After Jia dodged several times in a row, the black line was getting closer and closer. His face changed and he clapped his hands. Would escape, ranking technique. The ground rumbled. A huge black and red ghost face mask broke out of the ground, and after buckling together, it completely wrapped Jia inside. The black line arrived in an instant, immediately poured into the huge ghost face of the ranking technique, and pierced Jia's right shoulder hidden in it. Jiraiya screamed in pain, cursing in his heart what kind of monster this is. Although my ranking technique is not as strong as Hashirama Senju's defense, it is not something that can be broken easily. How could it be that it just changed the trajectory of the attack a little bit? Shikato arrived immediately and stood in front of Jiraiya after the ranking technique dissipated. This level of wood escape is very powerful. Although White Zetsu's disguise technique is powerful, it is not enough to use the opponent's blood limit. The Jiraiya in front of him should be the real body. But Jiraiya's own strength is impossible to use the power of wood escape of the ranking technique. Is someone controlling him? Thinking of the special White Zetsu with a whirlpool face that once possessed Obito in the original work, Shikato licked the corners of his dry mouth and had a rough guess in his heart. He stared at Jiraiya on the ground and showed a grim smile. I caught you, you little bastard. Jiraiya was not in a hurry and raised his head. Really, senior? I stopped running not because I can't run anymore. Shikato raised his eyebrows and had the urge to tear this playful smile apart. But more and more strange auras were coming around. Nara Shikato. You are too presumptuous. You brutally killed your colleagues and committed crimes in public. So many evil deeds. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go with the Nara clan? Before the person arrived, the warning voice had already come. Especially the last sentence, which was full of threats. Shikato's eyes, which were already full of gloom, suddenly became more violent. He was full of ferocity. I will add one more chapter. Starting tomorrow, the update time will temporarily stabilize at around 12 noon and around 10 p.m. By the way, thank you all for your monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. As for the plot, I deleted some texts due to the influence of comments, so it feels a bit wrong. I will keep my own pace and do my best. If it is not well written, please be merciful and just change the book quietly. Thank you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, Toadbunta is offline. The branches and leaves in the forest trembled. More than 10 figures of the ANBU suddenly appeared around and surrounded the deer man in the middle. The person who spoke was Kaoru Utatane, the senior advisor of Konoha. At this moment, her slightly white hair was combed neatly. When she was young, she was also a beautiful and powerful female ninja, but later she was in a high position, ate well, dressed well, and did not have to go to the front line, so now she has gained some weight. The original pair of watery eyes were almost squeezed together by the flesh on her face, and she squinted when she looked at everyone. Kaoru Utatane stood in front and scolded in a stern tone, Nara Shikato. You betrayed the fire, swish. Without saying a word, the deer man came to Kaoru Utatane in an instant and put his finger on her forehead. No wonder you are so bold, a mere clone is also whining, lightly snapped his fingers. Bang! Kaoru Utatene's head exploded, and then the whole person turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. Shikato turned to look at the ANBU around him, his eyes flashing with murderous light. But before he could make a move, Jiraiya, who was lying on the ground, suddenly formed seals with his hands. Wood release, cutting technique. He slapped his hands on the ground, and the next second, huge black wooden spikes suddenly jumped out from the ground or the trees, piercing the bodies of more than 10 ANBU members who were caught off guard. Jiraiya. Why? Most of the ANBU were special Junin, but they never figured out why Jiraiya would attack his own people until they died. They were obviously here to save people. Blood flowed along the wooden spikes and dyed the branches, fallen leaves and the ground red. Jiraiya stood up and withdrew the wood release, and the ANBU who were pierced to death fell to the ground one by one. He smiled at Shikato. Senior, I'm not waiting for these trash. It's better for me to do it myself than to rely on them. What I'm waiting for is, a black shadow seemed to cover the sky and the sun, completely blocking a large area of sunlight above Shikato's head. Asshole. You are so cruel. Along with a sound coming from the sky, a huge silver-white knife light fell on his head like thunder in the sky. Toad short knife slash. A huge reddish-brown toad fell from the sky. It was as big as a mountain, wearing a dark blue short coat, with reddish-brown immortal patterns on its body, and a huge pipe in its mouth. Jiraiya stood on its forehead, sensing that all the ANBU who came to arrest people below had died, and Jiraiya was immediately furious. At the same time as Gamabunchu landed, A huge short-handled katana of dozens of meters went straight to the deer man's neck and slashed down. The deer man glanced at the armor with obscure eyes. Then he looked up, and did not dodge Gamabunta's big knife, but made 5 fingers into claws. The veins on the back of his hand bulged, and the finger bones exerted force. Clang! The huge blade was pinched by 5 fingers, the knuckles were blue-white, and there were traces of black arcs jumping after the domineering entanglement. Gamabunta was stunned. With its huge size, the huge speed of falling, and its strong arm strength, a sword that was swung with all its strength was caught by a person with just his hands. Is this possible? Jiraiya had already seen the outrageousness of the deer man, and shouted, "Bunta!" Gamabunta immediately puffed up his cheeks and opened his mouth to spray a large amount of sticky oil at the deer man. Fire style, great flame bomb. Standing on the head of Gamabunta, Jiraiya simultaneously formed a seal and sprayed out a large mouthful of scorching fire waves. After the kerosene touched, it suddenly rolled up a sky-high flame, and the fire wave swallowed it madly, covering a very large area. The deer man stretched out his 5 fingers, and the armed color domineering was released. An invisible wave immediately bounced outward. The sky-high fire wave was immediately folded into 2 columns, avoiding the deer man on its own, and flooded into the jungle on both sides. At the same time, the 5 fingers holding the knife exerted force again. Squeak, the sound of metal twisting. Gamabunta's short sword couldn't bear it, snapped into 2 pieces. Shikato held the broken piece and threw it towards Gamabunta's waist. Be careful, Jiraiya warned. Gamabunta jumped up suddenly, and the huge broken sword smashed the jungle in succession, smashing a large piece of flying dust, and finally pierced deeply into the earth. When Bunta jumped into the air, Shikato seized this gap. He swung his fist suddenly and punched Gamabunta in the air. Strong armed color flowed on his fist, and black domineering electric arcs were ejected. The air was hit with extremely violent explosion waves. The sound was like thunder. Jiraiya's face changed drastically. Gamabunta opened his mouth and spit out 3 or 5 huge water balls. However, the water balls had just been sprayed out not far before they were smashed to pieces by the invisible shock wave in the air. Jiraiya immediately formed a seal. Wind style, wind barrier. He opened his mouth and spit out an invisible wind barrier, which loomed and blocked Gamabunta in front of him. The next moment, there was a very strong impact wave in the air. Like a muffled bell. A huge translucent fist print blasted the wind barrier, and then hit Gamabunta's abdomen, which he couldn't dodge in time. Wow! Gamabunta spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Jiraiya, what kind of monster is this guy? If the distance was not far enough, and the continuous use of the iron cannonball and the wind barrier offset most of the force, I'm afraid this punch would make it suffer on the spot, instead of just spitting blood. Jiraiya's face has become more and more heavy, and only when he really faced the deer man, he clearly felt a powerful attack and defense that was so strong that it was suffocating. Ninja method, needle hell. The long white hair was instantly upside down, and endless white hair silver needles shot at the deer man. Jiraiya was looking for the weakness of the deer man, and thus constantly launched tests. Deerman lowered his eyelids, bent his legs, and put force into his thighs. He took a deep breath. Jiraiya, you are looking for death, bang. Deerman jumped up, and the recoil force was fed back to the ground, and the land suddenly roared and exploded. In the place where Deerman originally stood, a large area began to collapse. Deerman's whole body drew a black line and penetrated into the sky. The overwhelming silver needles hit his body, but it didn't hurt, and he couldn't even do a little bit of resistance. Deerman was like an immortal who stepped into the clouds, straight into the sky. He swung a fist from high in the sky and hit Jiraiya below fiercely. Under the strong flow of arm color, the air became diluted. Jiraiya faced Deerman's fist directly, and he also truly understood how Deerman beat Jinchuariki. Such a terrifying attack and defense is simply despairing. Ninjutsu, Needle Jizo. Earth Escape, Earth Spear. Jiraiya didn't have time to think about it, and quickly changed his moves. First, he used the strong defensiveness of the Earth Spear to harden his whole body, and then instantly gathered his long hair like needles, wrapping himself in it. Needle Jizo is Jiraiya's special skill, which is extremely defensive. It has helped him to survive crises countless times, and it also has a passive attack that becomes stronger when facing a strong opponent. However, all this happened as the deer man's fist fell, and the extremely hard hair needles cracked. Bang! The air was also hit with a sonic boom. Jiraiya was directly knocked off Gamabunta's body, forming a straight diagonal line, falling like a meteor at a high speed. At the same time, Gamabunta's broken short sword also seized the opportunity and slashed the deer man's waist in midair. Clang! The sound of metal clashing resounded through the sky. The deer man was flung away by the impact, but at the last moment, he firmly grasped the blade of the broken sword with his 5 fingers, exerted force on his waist and abdomen, and the whole person used this to flip over and jump up again. The whole set of movements was extremely smooth. Now his body's stability is ridiculously strong, and he can move easily in various extreme conditions. He feels that even Flying Thunder God can adapt to it. He flipped high into the sky and reappeared right above Gamabunta. He was horizontal in midair, his body still flipping. The black arc overflowing from the Armament Haki wrapped his whole body, and the black light flashed. Go down. Finally, a strong kick penetrated with powerful force in Armament Haki, and kicked Gamabunta's reddish-brown head fiercely. Bang! A large ball of blood mist exploded in the air. Scarlet dyed a large area of the sky red. Gamabunta, who lost his head, fell down, and before he landed, he turned into a ball of smoke in midair and disappeared. Deer Man narrowed his eyes. A dead toad can't be resurrected even if he returns to Meiboku Mountain? If this toad can still come back to life, I will find the grave of the Six-Path Sage, dig it up and give it to you. Chapter 63 Nara Deerman Must Die. Inside the Hokage building of Konoha, the place was about to explode. In the Hokage's office, Konoha's 2 high-level advisors, the newly abdicated 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, and the Root Stanzo were all gathered here. The 4th Hokage and his wife, as well as the 4th Hokage's assistant advisor Nara Shikato were also here, and the rest were all driven out. There was only one person left in the ANBU guarding the door, and that was the 4th Hokage's disciple, Hatake Kakashi. Kakashi pulled the mask on his nose and stood guard at the door with a gloomy face. In the office, Kahoru Utang took the lead in challenging Shikato. Isn't the situation clear enough now? Shikato Nara has already betrayed. Let's not talk about the truth or falsehood of other situations, but he was able to blow up my clone without saying a word, which impressed me. Isn't this kind of person considered a traitor? 4th generation, what are you thinking about? Konoha was handed over to you to protect it, not for you to act arbitrarily and favor people. Mito Kataoin also took over the topic in a deep voice. Let's not talk about his previous style of work, the tragic death of Shinosuke, and the sacrifice of Gotashima on the spot. Are these meaningless in your eyes? Namikaze Minato was embarrassed, and he was a little hesitant to speak. He didn't know how to explain for Shikato. Why did Shikato appear in the place where Shinosuke was killed, and why did he kill Sarutobi Goto in public? Instead, Kushina snorted, Brother Shinosuke died, and we are also very sad. But can we judge that Shinosuke was killed by Deerman just based on Sarutobi Goto's words? How many people here don't know about Sarutobi Goto's character, or even the arrogance of the Sarutobi clan in the village? Well, I don't mean to insult the Sarutobi clan, I just stated a fact. At the end of the words, she restrained her tone a little, because the 3rd generation Sarutobi Hiruzen was standing beside him. Sarutobi Hiruzen was holding a pipe, looking out the window with his back turned, his eyes were obscure. Of course, he knew about the decline of the Sarutobi clan. But his status was there. If he was strict, his brothers in the clan would complain and keep saying sarcastic things about him. If he was too lax, the atmosphere in the clan would get worse. At first, he would teach the evil winds in the clan a lesson, but later, as the work of the Hokage became increasingly busy, he was too lazy to care. The atmosphere in the clan has indeed been not very good in recent years. But now is not the time to discuss this, but the sacrifice of the eldest son Sarutobi Shinosuke. According to the news that has been sent back, Shinosuke may have suffered unimaginable torture before his death. This made him, as a father, feel heavy-hearted and a little difficult to breathe. As for Nara Shikato, he did not put pressure on the 4th generation, because he also felt that there were some inexplicable doubts in the matter. But asking him to plead for Nara Shikato, that would be a joke. He just smoked his pipe in silence, and when he thought of the scene of the old man in Lake Biwa crying when he heard the news at home, he felt more and more uncomfortable. And the silence undoubtedly put more pressure on Namikaze Minato. Danzo squinted his one eye at this time, and he was also in a very bad mood. He was also very angry about Shikato and Gia appearing at the place where Shinosuke died tragically. Shikato is okay. After all, it's not just 1 or 2 days that he has been doing some small tricks, but it was just on the surface before. But Jiraiya is different. Danzo thinks highly of Jiraiya. Jiraiya usually behaves like a qualified root ninja, but he never expected that he would suddenly change. He appeared in the outer area without following orders. Danzo's face was very dark, but he was more concerned about something else. He said, "No matter what, since the ninjas in the village have been attacked, Nara Shikato must have the intention to leave. I know him. When he does the next thing, he must be determined to bear the corresponding consequences. He must have decided to betray Konoha, otherwise, he would not leave a way out for himself. And if that is the case, then he must not be allowed to leave Konoha alive." When the others heard this, they all looked over. Shikato had always been Danzo's right-hand man, and it seemed that the relationship between the two should be very good, but Danzo was the most ruthless one. Danzo snorted, "It is precisely because I understand him that I know the threat that Nara Shikato can bring, which Konoha cannot bear. Either help him or destroy him. There is no third way." Danzo was as ruthless as ever. When it was necessary, everything was easy to talk about, and even a little casualness in words could be ignored. But Danzo would never be merciful to those who dared to betray Konoha and him. Nara Shikato, who had been standing aside and silent, had a look of disappointment in his eyes. He knew very well that he had no right to speak in this situation. But he still couldn't help but speak. "I always believe in Shikato, he is not." "Shut up," Yuta Kaharu interrupted him with a cold shout. "The Nara clan has such a willful bastard. As the head of the Nara clan, you have an unshakable responsibility. And who knows which side you're on." Namikaze Minato didn't like to hear this. "Advisor, the matter of Shikato has not been concluded yet, and even if there is really a problem with Shikato, it has nothing to do with Shikaku and the others." Kushina pinched him. "What do you mean Shikato really has a problem? How could Shikato betray Konoha?" Namikaze Minato smiled helplessly. Midman glanced at Minato and retorted, "If there is a problem with the Nara clan, can't we suspect?" "Enough." Sarutobi Hirozen pinched his brows to cover up the tears of grief that were overflowing. "Shikaku is a qualified Konoha ninja. Don't hurt the hearts of your partners. What is the conclusion of the dear man's matter? Let's wait until the investigation is clear. The problem now is how to catch him back." Danzo spoke again. "Sending out an ordinary elite team is no different from sending him to die. Jiraiya has passed away, but with his strength, he may not be able to suppress Nara Shikato. Nara Shikato has the terrifying combat power to suppress the tailed beasts one-on-one, so I said that he must not be allowed to leave Konoha alive. As for capturing him alive, Sarutobi, you are too weak. Can you really capture that kind of person alive? Don't be silly, just destroy him like this." Danzo's eyes were ruthless. It was because he knew the threat of Shikato that he knew that when Shikato had the intention of betraying Konoha, he couldn't let Shikato escape. With such a terrifying fighting force, even if he does not retaliate against Konoha, but just joins the hostile ninja village, the threat it poses to Konoha in the future will be unimaginable. It's like being watched by a tailed beast all the time. It's chilling to think about it. Although he also thinks that there should be other hidden secrets in this, the current situation is obviously not the time to consider so much. At this point, right or wrong is no longer important, and Nara Shikato has no way back. Just like dealing with some other things in the past, get him first, and then investigate right and wrong. At most, give him a clean name after death. Isn't Hatake Tsukumo vindicated now? Kakashi is still very grateful to Sarutobi. As for capturing Nara Shikato alive? Impossible. It's okay for that kind of person not to look up, but as long as he looks up, there will only be sky in his field of vision, no more cages. There is Neverland in the eyes of an eagle. Nara Shikato is an eagle, he must die. Chapter 64, 2 Hokage and 2 Sages. Otherwise, it would still be sealed in that Arc-Bagua dungeon. Sure enough, humans are more cruel than the tailed beasts. Midman also stood up. "We old guys know that you and your wife have a good relationship with Nara Shikato, but now is not the time to talk about personal relationships. Nara Shikaku is his brother, but ask Shikaku, does he have the confidence to stop Nara Shikato?" Nara Shikaku's face turned pale, he knew it very well. With Shikato's temper, he was usually kind and amiable, but if he really pissed him off, even the gods and the gods would be useless. Moreover, Shikaku always felt that there was definitely a reason why Shikato had come to this point. He firmly believed in this. There was silence in the Hokage's office for a moment. Sarutobi Hirozen, holding his pipe, spoke with a heavy look in his eyes, "Then get rid of Nara Shikato. Whether it's right or wrong, since he has come to this point, there is no turning back. Kushina was shocked. No, Minato's face also sank. He has been in power for too short a time, and the transfer of power has just begun. If the third Hokage is determined to give an order directly, then even if he wants to save it, he can't do it. Kushina was anxious and said directly, I will persuade Shikato, quack. At this time, the communication frog of Myaboku Mountain suddenly jumped in. Namake's Minato was surprised and said, Kausuke. Toad Kausuke jumped onto the Hokage's desk. Minato, something bad is going to happen. Jiraiya is in trouble, and Boss Bunta is dead. Jiraiya needs someone to support him, otherwise Jiraiya may not be able to hold on for long. What? Namake's Minato stood up suddenly. In the office, everyone else was also shocked. Kaoru sent out his clones to lead 2 teams of ANBU, and after hearing the news, Jiraiya immediately rushed to support. As a result, it was not long before Kaoru's clone exploded, and not long after, Jiraiya also had problems. You know, Jiraiya is one of the 3 ninjas of Konoha, and he has a great reputation in the 2 ninja world wars. Danzo's face darkened. Although he expected that Jiraiya might not be able to stop Shikato, he did not expect it to be so fast. Danzo's eyes were immediately full of ruthlessness. We must get rid of him. When I first recruited him, his threat was not so exaggerated. His speed is the biggest weakness, but in such a short time, has the weakness been hidden? Otherwise, with Jiraiya's strength, he would not be unable to hold on. Minato immediately stood up and said solemnly, I will stop Shikato, and I will make him tell us everything that happened. Kushina grabbed his hand nervously. Minato reassured her and whispered to Shikaku, don't worry, I will bring the dear man back. Sarutobi Hirozen put down his pipe. Minato, I will go with you. Then he said to Danzo and others, Kaoru, notify the Uchiha clan to strengthen the security in the village during this period and raise the security level to the highest level. Menayan, notify other major families to guard the gates of the village. Not even an ant can easily crawl in. Danzo, select an elite force and go to support as soon as possible. Danzo said in a deep voice, what are you going to do? I will find a way to keep him, and if not, let him stay forever. Sarutobi Hirozen said firmly. He had made up his mind. The tragic death of his eldest son made him firm his will for once. Danzo, don't have too many illusions. Nara Shikato is not just any guy. He may be stronger than I expected. Outside Konoha, in the jungle of the border area, Jiraiya was knocked down from the sky by Shikaben's punch, and his fist went straight through the trees. Fortunately, at the last moment of falling, he released the hardening of the earth spear in time and softened the ground with earth escape. Bang! Mud splattered everywhere. Jiraiya was still wrapped in Jizo's white hair, but he coughed up blood several times. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked up, just in time to see Shikaben rolling in the air and kicking Gamabunta's head. Jiraiya's face changed drastically. Gamabunta had a deep relationship with him. He was the best one among the summoned beasts of Myaboku Mountain, and they were even better than brothers after so many years together. Nara Shikato, Jiraiya gritted his teeth and spat out Shikato's name, his eyes full of anger, and he responded to Shikato with an unprecedented determination to kill him. Psychic technique. Bang! Fukasaku and Shima appeared. Little Jiraiya, what are you doing? Fukasaku was a little surprised that Jiraiya was injured again. It was clearly a peaceful time. Shima looked at the sky with an unbelievable look on his face. Dad, is that Bunta? Fukasaku turned his head and saw the headless toad Bunta scattering blood all over the sky, and then turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. Fukasaku was stunned, and then a wave of anger filled his small body. Bunta, Shikato flipped from the air and landed on the ground. The first thing he did was not to cause trouble for Jiraiya, and he even completely ignored the 2 big toad sages, but stared at Kabuto, who was standing in the distance watching the show very comfortably. Deerman's pupils shrank, and he exhaled. Oh, you are quite courageous, you bastard. Just as Deerman guessed, the whirlpool-faced white Zetsu was now possessed by Jia and controlling Jia. At this moment, he was also a little surprised at Deerman's strength. He didn't expect that Nara Deerman, who is the second target, would bring an unexpected surprise. Oh my. No wonder Black Zetsu wanted to mess up Konoha. The middle-aged and young generation of Hokage Kakashi and Uchiha Shisu are already ready to take off. The 4th generation of Minato Namikaze, the 9-tails Jinchuriki Uzumaki Kushina, and the Nara Deerman in front of him who is as strong as a monster. This does not include the middle-aged and old generation who are not yet old. If we count the top fighting forces of Uchiha and Hyuga. With Konoha's terrifying war potential, if there are no more chaos, it will not take long for them to unify the ninja world. Even if not, I am afraid that it will form a situation of monopoly, which is not conducive to some of Black Zetsu's ideas about the tailed beasts in the future. Konoha must be weakened. One of the targets of this trip is Nara Shikato. All they need is a trigger to detonate the trap. Sarutobi Goto is a useful flag, brainless and jealous. He even stabbed the son of the Hokage in the back. He is a talent. But let him die. After all, his strength is a bit useless. As for the other main target, Orochimaru, it is convenient to act after Nara Shikato distracts Konoha's attention. However, the power of Nara Shikamen's detonation is unexpectedly terrifying. The intensity of this second target is even greater than the first target. Fortunately, I didn't choose the wrong target, otherwise, if this wave of Feng Shuman and Nara Shikato joined forces, who could withstand it? It's just a killing spree. Uzumaki faced by Zetsu secretly clicked his tongue. 5 updates today. Chapter 65 Sage Mode. The vortex-faced white Zetsu was stared at by the deer man with malicious eyes. Feeling the awe in his words, he immediately changed into a look of fear and trepidation. Then he turned around and showed full courtesy to Jiraiya. With a very respectful tone, he asked Jiraiya with concern, "Master Jiraiya, how are you?" Jiraiya has been staring at the deer man, not daring to be distracted at all. "I'm fine, you leave here quickly, this is not a battle that a little kid like you can intervene in." The vortex-faced white Zetsu immediately looked deeply moved. This really moved him badly. "Master Jiraiya really understands me too well. It would be even better if both of you died here." "Hell, leave? Leave the hell?" The deer man frowned and sneered, and his legs were full of strength, and the whole person was ejected like a cannonball. There was a bang in the air. The earth also collapsed belatedly. Shikato had already rushed to the front of Uzumaki-faced white Zetsu, raised his hand and punched, and the straight right punch was wrapped in a strong armed color, which made the air twist. "Asshole! Don't look down on me." Jiraiya saw Shikato attacking the ninja in the village in front of him, and he seemed to have taken him to heart at all, and he became even more angry. Ninja technique, chaotic lion hair technique. The white hair behind his head suddenly grew, like an indestructible vine, entangled Shikato crazily. The white hair was like a knife, constantly tightening. Shikato was entangled and bound by the white hair like steel wire, and his figure stopped not far in front of Uzumaki-faced white Zetsu. Uzumaki-faced white Zetsu spoke softly to Shikato from an angle that Jiraiya could not see. "Senior, count my daring, it has been more than 800 years, what can you do? Do you really want to kill me?" As a person who was once bound by the infinite Tsukuyomi, it has indeed been hundreds or thousands of years. The first generation and Madara are both his grandchildren in front of him. The pupils of the deer man contracted slightly, and suddenly he opened his mouth and spit out. A thin black shadow shot out like 1,000 books. At close range, the vortex-faced white Zetsu could not dodge in time, and the thin shadow pierced his right shoulder. But it didn't hurt, and not even a drop of blood came out. He looked at the wound and saw a dark dot. "What is this?" He wiped it with his hand, but failed to wipe it off, and couldn't feel anything strange. The deer man tilted his head slightly, and through the gaps in the tight white hair, he suddenly grinned. "You little bastard. I will stare at you to death." The shadow mark can't be erased or wiped off. Even if you hide in the ends of the earth, you will be pulled out by the deer man. Being teased like this, the deer man is not so good-tempered, and he will not stop until he beats the black and white Zetsu to death. After injecting the shadow mark into the body of the vortex-faced white Zetsu, the deer man then turned to look at Jiraiya through the white hair restraints through a gap with extremely cold eyes. One after another, entangled endlessly. "Jiraiya, you can do it." In the gap, the pupils filled with haze, as if looking at a corpse, were already colorless. Extremely cold. Jiraiya's hair stood up all of a sudden, and he felt a faint chill. Taking advantage of the opportunity when the deer man was restrained, the sage Fukasaku no longer hesitated and opened his mouth to spit. Water escape, water slash. An extremely high-intensity water column shot out. It formed a straight line and hit the deer man's head. The water slash, which was enough to easily tear steel, hit the deer man's head, but it only made the deer man shake his head, and not even a hair fell off. It just wet his hair. The deer man was still in a state of being imprisoned by the white hair, But it did not prevent him from moving his neck. He turned to look at the sage Fukasaku, the toads of Myaboku Mountain, one by one. "Are so annoying." He exerted a little force on his arms and broke all the white hair that bound him. The deer man took the opportunity to grab a handful of hair and pulled it back. Jiraiya couldn't help but fly backwards towards the passers-by. Shima Sage was still impressed by the scene of the deer man tearing the Jinchuriki with his hands. Of course, it was impossible to watch Jiraiya being beaten to death with one punch. He looked at the sage Fukasaku, and both jumped into the air and opened their mouths. Immortal technique, frog croaking. Gwa gwa gwa, circles of strange ripples spread out in the air. The deer man was stunned for a moment, somewhat surprised that the extraordinary level of armed color was not completely immune to the effects of immortal techniques and illusions. Although the time of influence was extremely limited, even less than a thought, the deer man did hear these waves of toads croaking, and was slightly dazed for a moment. He took a moment to glance at the Armament Haki mark in the panel attributes. Sure enough, the plus sign at the back lit up again. Immortal attack has an especially obvious effect on Armament Haki. However, Deerman didn't have time to think about this for the time being, because when he was about to punch Jiraiya, he was suddenly sucked into an unknown space barrier. The flesh-colored stomach wall was all around, the space was not large, and the flesh wall was shrinking very quickly. Deerman's legs had already sunk into the soft stomach wall. He tried to pull it out, but couldn't. This strange stomach wall had a strong adsorption force. And because it was so soft, he had some strength but nowhere to use it. Deerman looked around, and Jiraiya didn't seem to be in this section of stomach wall. As the surrounding stomach wall's peristaltica contracted, Deerman was squeezed in. Armament Haki, released. Boom. Quack. There was a bang, accompanied by a frog croak that sounded like pain. The entire stomach wall exploded into meat flakes, and disappeared in the next second. Deerman returned to the jungle. At this time, Jiraiya was squatting on the ground. On his shoulders, the sages Fukasaku and Shima were arguing over dinner. Uzumaki White Zetsu had disappeared. After the breeze blew, Jiraiya, who had been relaxed, stood up suddenly. He looked at the reappearing deer man in disbelief. Someone could actually walk out of the stomach wall space of the Iwajuku giant toad safely. The sages Fukasaku and Shima were also amazed. The Iwajuku giant toad was older than the two of them, and its body was even more exaggerated. It had lived in the hidden village of Myaboku Mountain for many years. Its whole body was a treasure, and its stomach wall was a natural barrier technique. It was very restrictive for physical skills masters. As long as it was sucked into the stomach wall space, it was basically impossible to escape. Physical skills could not be performed in such a soft and narrow space, and were naturally restricted. But I never expected that the deer man actually got out very easily, and it seemed effortless. Fortunately, Jiraiya never relaxed and entered the sage transformation in advance, otherwise he would really have no chance. Shikato closed his eyes and sensed the position of the shadow mark, then raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the village. Finally, he retracted his gaze and fell on Jiraiya. Reddish-brown traces of immortalization had appeared on Jiraiya's face, his pupils had turned into horizontal pupils like a toad, his nose was arched, with bumps appearing, and his teeth became extremely sharp. Fukasaku Sage and Shima Sage stood on his shoulders on the left and right, temporarily merging with Jiraiya with a two-life technique. Jiraiya said in a heavy tone, "Nara Shikato, you are too dangerous, I will not let you go this time." The death of Gamabunta made him determined not to let the other party go easily. Shikato sneered, talking too much nonsense. At worst, you come to kill me, or let me kill you. There is no third choice. Chapter 66 Myaboku Mountain. The deer man had no expression on his face and slowly approached Jiraiya on foot. Jiraiya exhaled deeply and made full mental preparations. But the deer man suddenly fell into the shadow of the earth in the next second. Black arrow shadows appeared on the ground, as if thousands of arrows were fired at the same time, sweeping towards Jiraiya. Jiraiya kicked off his clogs and laid on the ground with his hands. His hands and feet immediately began to frog-like, turning into a webbed foot shape, and his limbs swelled more than twice as much. Bang! The ground collapsed, and Jiraiya instantly disappeared under the siege of countless black shadows. He was in midair, shaking his white hair, and a perception barrier in his body immediately spread out, covering a large area with him as the core. Nothing? Jiraiya was extremely surprised. Within the range of the perception barrier, He did not find any trace of the deer man, and there was no chakra, as if he had disappeared. "Be careful," Fukasaku Sage suddenly shouted. A black shadow suddenly appeared behind him, and the deer man emerged from the shadow and punched Jiraiya mercilessly. In the frog state, Jiraiya's physique has been greatly improved, and his already very neat skills seemed to be faster than expected. He turned his head to avoid this fatal punch, hugged the deer man's arm with both hands, and without pausing, he threw it directly to the back. Jiraiya in the frog's form is very powerful. But the deer man still took the opportunity to hold Jiraiya's forearm with his excellent balance and stability at the moment of being thrown out. With the strong inertia of the throw, he was in midair and firmly grasped Jiraiya's forearm. His 5 fingers were full of malice, so he exerted extreme force, his finger bones protruded, and his knuckles turned blue and white. While turning his body, he suddenly threw Jiraiya out like a shot put. A blood mist exploded in the air. Jiraiya was actually crushed half of his forearm at the moment of being thrown out because the force of the deer man's 5 fingers was too fierce. The blood traced an arc. Jiraiya's face had changed greatly in the air, and he was thrown away by this fierce force, and was directly penetrated into the ground in a diagonal line. A large piece of dust was stirred up on the ground. Shikato turned over and landed safely, holding Jiraiya's broken arm in his hand. Blood was dripping from the broken end, and the bones inside were crushed. He stared indifferently at the place where the dust was flying, and Jiraiya was still there. The dust was dissipating little by little. Jiraiya covered the wound of his broken arm and half knelt on the ground. His head and face were covered with blood. He kept coughing up blood from his mouth again. Just one collision made him look like this. Jiraiya's face was pale. Shikato's strength was beyond imagination. Illusion had no effect on him. He had lost an arm after only one collision with physical skills. Ninjutsu didn't hurt him at all. Immortal skills seemed to be hard to describe. This scene was really despairing. Fukasaku Sage was also a little scalp-numbing. "Little Jiraiya, how did you two fight? If I remember correctly, he should also be a Konoha ninja, isn't he on good terms with Minato?" Jiraiya gritted his teeth and endured the pain. "He betrayed those who trusted him," Shijin Sage said angrily. "Dad, why do you care so much? This bastard killed Bunta, just for this reason. He can't be let go." Upon hearing this, Fukasaku Sage immediately taught a lesson. "Don't be silly, Mom. When we agreed to be summoned, we should have the determination to sacrifice. Bunta is dead, but we can't be blinded by excessive anger," Shijin Sage said angrily. "It's so annoying. Anyway, I won't let him go." Fukasaku Sage was helpless. The mother of the child became willful, and it couldn't do anything. Moreover, it's probably not a question of whether to let the other party go, but whether the other party will let them go. Then, it asked Jiraiya, "Little Jiraiya, how are you? I can still hold on." Jiraiya gritted his teeth and nodded. He had already prepared for the worst. While the dust had not completely dissipated, Jiraiya, who was hiding in it, sensed the position of the deer man and knelt on the ground with his head slightly lowered. Fortunately, most of his techniques did not require hand seals, and could be completed with one hand or even without seals. Immortal technique, thousands of hair needles. Ding ding dang dang. Countless white hair needles were like pear blossoms in a rainstorm, constantly hitting the deer man's body, but only a crisp sound of iron hammering was heard. It was more like the blood swallow making its last wail. Jiraiya's face was gloomy, and he sighed secretly. As expected, the immortal technique was also very ineffective. The deer man threw away the broken arm, bent his knees and penetrated the power, and was entangled with the arm collar. The ground began to collapse little by little. Bang! He faced countless thousands of hair needles and attacked head-on. In the dust, a wave of heat rolled out. Large swathes of oil, fierce fire, and violent wind suddenly broke up the dust from inside to outside, and mixed them together, and rushed straight towards the deer man who was rushing towards him. Immortal technique, Gomen. Oil pours on the fire, and the wind helps the fire oil. In an instant, the overwhelming and inextinguishable fire burned fiercely, completely enveloping the deer man in all directions. The deer man's forward figure did not pause at all, raised his arm, and the armed color flowed on his fist on a large scale, and the perception completely locked Jiraiya's position. "Raise your arm. Swing your fist." The strongest and most fatal punch directly exploded the air. The strong fluctuation of the arm color caused this punch to break the overwhelming flames into pieces, and the violent wind blew the fire in the opposite direction to Jiraiya. At the same time, What was even more terrifying was the deadly fist power that came, as if a mountain had fallen from the sky. Before hitting Jiraiya, he was already so depressed that he couldn't even lift his head. Jiraiya was horrified, and seemed to be in despair. The two great immortals were also shocked by the terrifying power of this punch. After looking at each other, they clapped their hands without hesitation. The summoning technique. The two great immortals jointly launched the summoning technique. Bang! A cloud of smoke exploded, immediately followed by a deafening crash. The terrifying fluctuations were like 1,000 beasts galloping, tearing everything in all directions. The ground was plowed crazily by the invisible fluctuations at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the fluctuations came, the surrounding trees were chopped into pieces and were wrapped in the strong wind and rushed around. Even the clouds in the sky were cracked, as if the sky was broken. This punch, the deer man used all his strength, and he punched Jiraiya to death with one punch. But the effect was not ideal. The deer man looked at the huge blue-white boundary monument of more than 10 meters in front of Jiraiya. The three characters Maiboku Mountain were deeply engraved on the boundary monument. However, at this time, the extremely hard boundary monument was covered with spider web-like cracks, as if it would burst if touched. The two immortals also breathed a sigh of relief, but when they noticed the completely destroyed environment around them, their faces suddenly changed. Especially the boundary monument of Maiboku Mountain, which had stood for thousands of years, was now full of cracks on the surface, and a green liquid-like substance kept flowing out of the cracks. This was a natural energy that was so rich that it was suffocating. Chapter 67, The Hero's Desolation and the Golden Flash. At this moment, Shima Sage no longer had any intention of revenge. Why fight? It would be a blessing if he was not beaten to death. The two great sages said immediately, "Little Jiraiya, find a way to withdraw first." No one can withstand such a punch. Even if it is a complete nine-tailed demon fox, it can't bear a few punches, let alone you. If you are hit, you will be dead or disabled. This guy is simply not a human. Jiraiya's scalp was tingling. Although he was angry that Shikato killed Gamabunta, the current situation was indeed too tricky. Staying would only lead to his own death. But even so, Jiraiya was not ready to leave. It was not because of anger that affected his reason, but simply because behind him was the Konoha ninja village. This was something worth risking his life to protect. Even if Shikato did not intend to go in and make a scene, as long as there was a slight possibility, he would guard the border gate of the village. This kind of monster level must not be allowed to break in. The whole Konoha might not be able to withstand a few punches from him. Even if it only takes one more second, I must grit my teeth and persevere. Facing the persuasion of the two great immortals, Jiraiya said in a low voice, "Master Fukasaku, Master Shima, you should go back." Immediately, the immortal Shima taught him a lesson. "What nonsense are you talking about, little Jiraiya? Facing such a monster, why don't you withdraw and think of a solution first, but stay here and wait to die?" Jiraiya had a bitter look on his face, but it soon turned into a heroic smile. He tried hard to put on a hearty attitude of a hero, but he had lost an arm and was in a very miserable state. "As a Konoha ninja, I have to protect my family's reputation. Even if I have to risk my life for it, I will do it." Sage Shima was anxious. "Little Jiraiya," Sage Fukasaku taught him again, "Mother, stop talking. Some things are more important than life. Instead of wasting time here to persuade little Jiraiya, it is better to urge Minato and others to support immediately." At this moment, Shikato was standing at the foot of the boundary monument, looking at the green energy filling up the cracks on it, reaching out to touch it, and his fingertips began to petrify immediately. However, with a rush of armed color, the petrified part immediately recovered. What a good thing. The natural energy here is so rich that Shikato can feel a natural warm attraction just by approaching it. This is simply a treasure mountain. He took out a sealing talisman paper from his pocket, sealed this giant boundary monument, and then threw it into the sealing scroll. The two great sages watched as Deerman skillfully took away the boundary stone of their own Maiboku Mountain, but they could only stare blankly, helpless. Although this thing is theirs, it is a dead object and there is no such thing as recognizing the owner. After taking the boundary stone, Deerman set his sights on Jiraiya again. The two great sages first told Jiraiya to be careful and try to delay it as much as possible, so as not to die too early. Then they disappeared from Jiraiya's shoulders with a bang. On the one hand, he hurried to urge Minato to help, and on the other hand, he went to ask the master for advice. This kind of monster level, naturally leave it to the monsters. They can't deal with it, but some can deal with him. Dearman can't do anything about the escape of the summoned beast for the time being. But he is worried about the Toad clan. Myaboku Mountain, sooner or later, he will have to go up. Jiraiya's sage mode is not perfect. After losing the help of the two great Toad sages, it is difficult for him to maintain the state continuously, and the sage mode begins to gradually degenerate into its original appearance. But Jiraiya was not afraid. Instead, he squatted on the ground and looked at Shikato. He was not going to resist anymore. He said he was panicking before. When Fukasaku asked him how he was, Jiraiya lied. His condition was already very bad. If he hadn't been holding on, he would have fainted long ago. Now he was unable to move, and it was impossible for him to escape. Behind him was the Konoha ninja village. How could he escape? But it was wishful thinking to stop Shikato. Now, he calmed down and asked the most confusing question, Nara Shikato, what is your purpose? What good will it do you to betray your friends, relatives, and village? Shikato frowned. What a ridiculous question. Before you take action, why don't you think about the meaning of my doing this? You remembered it after you lost the fight, right? It's really ironic. Shikato had a blank expression on his face. He didn't plan to say a word to a dying man. He just raised his hand, and a black shadow suddenly extended from his fingertips. Jiraiya was not afraid of death, but he was unwilling to die in such an unclear way. He gritted his teeth and said, Nara Shikato, tell me the reason. I'm happy to. Jiraiya's eyes widened suddenly. A black shadow nail flashed from Shikato's fingertips. The black shadow nail instantly pierced through Jiraiya's eyebrows, and a trace of blood flowed down his forehead. Jiraiya's incredible expression froze immediately. But at this moment, with a bang, Jiraiya suddenly turned into smoke and disappeared on the spot. Shikato was stunned. Reverse summoning technique? His pupils shrank suddenly. The two Toad immortals had never given up on Jiraiya. But it was too late to summon them now. Even the immortal talisman of the big Toad immortal should not be able to save the dead. But at the same time as Jiraiya disappeared, a golden glimmer flashed by. Shikato turned his head and narrowed his eyes slightly. Minato Namikaze and Hirozen Sarutobi arrived at the last second. Just like in the hot-blooded comics, heroes can always save the world at the last second. If Minato Namikaze is a hero, then Shikatobi should undoubtedly be considered the great devil who destroys the world now. Unfortunately, the hero arrived one step too late, and Jiraiya was gone. Minato Namikaze only saw that Jiraiya teacher was summoned by the reverse summoning technique at the last moment and disappeared, and did not see the piercing wound between Jiraiya's eyebrows. Subconsciously, he thought that Jiraiya teacher was out of danger, which made him slightly relieved. This situation is not irreparable. He asked with a serious face, Shikatobi, why is this happening? Why has it come to this? Hirozen Sarutobi did not rush to act, because he also wanted to know a reason. He wanted to know whether Shinosuke died at the hands of Shikato Nara. Shikatobi stood there, and when he heard this, the haze in his eyes surfaced again. Black and white Zetsu. Don't even think about running away. Then, he looked at Minato Namikaze, still feeling irritated. Why is this happening? You ask me, who should I ask? The whirlpool-faced white Zetsu who is playing tricks behind the scenes? Or the black Zetsu who has been hiding until now without even showing his head? If you can't catch this kind of thing, what's the point of giving more explanations? Who would believe it? Except for a few people, how many other people in the village are willing to believe this unreliable reason? Do you want me to be talked about to death behind my back like Hokage Tsukumo? Don't be ridiculous, I'm not Hokage Tsukumo. Instead of expecting others to save me, I would rather jump out of the quagmire myself. Even if I'm covered in mud. Facing the kind-hearted Minato Namikaze, Shikato opened his mouth, but he couldn't give an explanation after all. Because this is no longer something that can be explained in a few words. If it continues like this, who knows how many Konoha ninjas will come to listen to his explanation. If you can't catch the black and white Zetsu, all explanations are like covering up, all in vain. The corrupt upper echelons of Konoha will not give him time to slowly track down the uncertain murderer. Those corrupt families who are addicted to the power of the upper echelons will not let him go. He doesn't want to be bound by Konoha anymore. Only by jumping out of this world can he give it a try. Shikato looked at Minato Namikaze with an obscure look. I want to leave Konoha, Hokage-sama, what do you think? Shikato's meaning is very clear. If you refuse, then continue to fight. If you agree, then leave alone. Minato's expression is full of pain. Shikato, is there no turning back? Turn back? Can you be more naive, Minato Namikaze? At this point, if I go back, do I have to spend the rest of my life in the Konoha prison? Chapter 68, The 68th Ape Demon. Shikato's expression was firm, without the slightest wavering, and he stared at Minato Namikaze. Minato took a deep breath. I understand. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at him in astonishment. What did you understand? Minato. That's not what you said before you came here. You said you would take him back? Minato, I will be responsible for all the consequences. Minato Namikaze closed his eyes and said firmly, I believe there must be other reasons behind this incident. If after investigation, it is really Shikato's fault, I will catch him again and take personal responsibility for this incident. Shikato turned around silently, without stopping, and walked away. His steps were not fast, but it seemed to be stepping on Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart. Unlike Minato's dilemma, Sarutobi Hiruzen has gradually become serious and shook his head. I can't let him go. Thinking of the unclear death of Shinosuke, thinking of the terrifying threat of Shikato mentioned by Danzo, thinking of the indifference shown by Shikato this time. Such an unstable factor cannot be allowed to leave. No matter what the result is, he must be kept in Konoha, alive or dead. Nara Shikato must not leave alive. Summoning technique. Bang! Smoke exploded, and a white-haired ape demon who was half a person troll appeared. He wore a Konoha Ford protector and a tiger-patterned shirt. Ape Demon was a summoned beast that had shined in the first two Ninja World Wars. He had an indestructible body and could transform into the Vajra Ruai Rod. He was Sarutobi Hiruzen's greatest helper. Sarutobi Hiruzen's face was firm. Ape Demon, transform, bang. Ape Demon did not ask for the reason, and turned into the Vajra Ruai Rod without saying a word. Sarutobi Hiruzen held it in his palm, with one end pointing directly at Shikato's vest. Ape Demon, stretch. The Vajra Ruai Rod suddenly stretched continuously, and the speed of growth was extremely fast. In an instant, it had already hit Shikato's back. If an ordinary ninja was hit, it would almost certainly die. At the last moment when he was about to collide with a deer man, who was walking away with his back to the enemy, suddenly stopped and turned back. His face was full of ferocity. He had the ferocious look of a demon, with his teeth bared. At that moment, as if frozen, the beast, the darkest and purest, bared its fangs. Bang! The Vajra Ruai stick was frightened by the sudden horror and malice, and it could not maintain its shape change, and turned back into the posture of the ape demon. The ape demon was terrified. What the hell? The deer man's eyes were filled with gloom, and his murderous intent was boiling. Old thing. Don't mess with me again. The Sarutobi clan has been corrupted to that extent, but you turned a blind eye. Instead, you kept pestering me again and again, and you all treated me as a clay Buddha. If it weren't for the sudden appearance of Minato Namikaze, the deer man would have stopped suppressing the swelling malice. At this moment, the deer man was like a demon standing in the world. At this time, Minato spoke bitterly again. Lord Sarutobi, please let Shikato leave. I will bear all the consequences, even if I have to pay a price for it. Sarutobi Hiruzen was annoyed that Minato was still stubborn and said, You will bear it? Can you bear it? Minato, you are too naive. Have you completely forgotten the will of fire? Stifle all factors that threaten the peace and stability of the village. Isn't this what a Hokage should do? Namikaze Minato looked a little painful, closed his eyes and lowered his head again. Before coming, he had comforted his friends and wife that he would take Shikato back. But when he really faced Shikato, he realized that Shikato had made up his mind, even if it meant fighting to the death. This determination was not something he could shake. Looking at Nara Shikato, Namikaze Minato fell into a struggle and hesitation. Sarutobi Hiruzen snorted. At this moment, he forgot his past weakness and hated Minato's cowardice and hesitation. Minato, it may not be the right decision to hand over the position of Hokage to you. Namikaze Minato raised his head in shock, his face more embarrassed than ever. Sarutobi Hiruzen ignored him, but turned around and rushed directly towards the deer man, holding the Sarutoki who had transformed into the Vajra Ruai Rod in his hand. Halfway through the rush, he threw out 3 shuriken. One-handed seal. Ninjutsu, shuriken shadow clone. Bang bang bang. The shuriken shot out and immediately turned into an overwhelming force. The corners of the deer man's mouth cracked into a cruel smile. Sandame, You are looking for death yourself, so you can't blame me. Armament Haki, the domineering release shook away all the dense shuriken. But immediately afterwards, a pitch-black Vajrarui rod seized a gap and stretched out again, pointing directly at his face. Bang! The powerful impact pushed the deer man to slide more than 10 meters on the ground. The eyes on the Vajrarui stick opened, and two powerful monkey hands extended, grabbing the deer man's neck. Success. The ape demon was excited, but always felt that it was unexpectedly simple. Soon it realized that something was wrong. With its natural strength, even the shuriken could be easily twisted into a twist. But the deer man's neck was harder than expected, and the ape demon used all his strength but to no avail. Instead, the arm that was stretched out was grabbed by the deer man's hands. Success. The difference is that this time it was the deer man. The 5 fingers exerted force, and the ape arm held in the palm began to deform little by little. The ape demon has an indestructible body, but this hard body is mainly reflected when it transforms into the Vajrarui stick. Although the body in the normal form is still very hard, it is very limited compared to the state of the Vajrarui stick. The severe pain in the arm made the ape demon couldn't help but roar. Crunching, the bones began to twist and break. The monkey demon's scream of pain became even louder. Sarutobi Hiruzen realized something was wrong and immediately stopped, letting go of the Vajrarui stick, and began to quickly form seals with both hands. Earth style, Earth Dragon Bullets technique. Fire style, Fire Dragon Bullets technique. Composite ninjutsu, Earth Dragon Flame Flow. A huge earth-brown dragon spewed out from the ground, spewing hot flames and crashed into the deer man. The deer man tightly grasped the monkey demon's arm, allowing the flaming dragon to hide him and completely swallow him up. However, Sarutobi Hiruzen's expression did not show any relaxation, because from the place where the flaming earth dragon was submerged, the Vajrarui stick's scream of pain was heard even louder. Sarutobi Hiruzen shouted, "Monster demon!" Bang! The submerged ruins exploded. And the figure suddenly broke out of the ground and jumped to Sarutobi Hiruzen's side with a nimble figure. The ape demon was in a very sorry state, and his already black face had become even darker. There were no obvious injuries on his body. However, from the shoulders down, starting from the forearms, more than half of his arms had completely disappeared, and blood was constantly flowing out from the broken wounds. The ape demon endured the pain and said, "Sarutobi, be careful. That person's body is very strange, just like I am indestructible after my transformation, and his strength is also extremely strong." Sarutobi Hiruzen certainly knew this, but he didn't expect it to be so exaggerated. The flaming mud flow was mostly broken up by a palm from the inside. The deer man walked out silently, holding the 2 broken arms of the ape demon in his hands, and the knuckles of his hands were stained red by the blood from the broken arms. In close combat, the deer man has never been afraid of anyone. 5 more chapters. I don't know if it is written well, but it was really affected by the comments repeatedly, and some content was changed again and again. I dare not read the comments anymore. The few chapters I had saved are almost gone. There should have been some left, but I was repeatedly influenced by the comments and deleted and revised a lot. Now there is really nothing left. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69, Offense and Defense. Deerman casually threw the 2 broken arms at a corner, bent his knees, leaned forward and took a deep breath. Sarutobi Hiruzen immediately focused his expression, and the demon turned into the Vajrarui stick again, but blood kept flowing from the stick. "Be careful, Sarutobi." Bang! A ripple spread in the air. After the ground exploded, a large area collapsed. Deerman appeared in front of Sarutobi Hiruzen as if he had teleported, raised his arm and punched him. The Vajrarui stick turned and stood in front of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Ling! A sharp collision sound rang out. The Vajrarui stick used extreme fighting skills to help Sarutobi Hiruzen remove most of the impact of the Deerman. It has never been afraid of anyone in a head-on confrontation. This is also the first time that Deerman has encountered an opponent who can hold his fist and fight each other. Under the violent mood, there is a rare excitement. Sure enough, it is still the Hokage who is strong enough. In excitement, the deer man's black pupils slightly expanded, and he began to swing his fists faster and harder. Clang 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 clang. The diamond stick danced vigorously in Sarutobi Hirozen's hands, making the defense almost watertight. Every time they hit together, the shock wave caused the surrounding ground to collapse continuously. The deer man was getting more and more excited, and his punch speed was getting faster and faster. Sure enough, none of those who can become Hokage are ordinary people. They are all very resistant to beating. It's exciting. 1 punch, 2 punches, 5 punches, 17 punches, 32 punches. The ground had already collapsed beyond recognition, and the huge shock sound was endless. The next second, the deer man swung his fist again, but suddenly missed, and his body staggered forward. His face was very unhappy. Sarutobi Hirozen retreated a long distance with his instant body technique. His hands were already trembling, and his knuckles were full of lacerations from the shock. At the same time, a mark of a mouth appeared on the diamond stick. Wow, a large mouthful of blood spit out. Tsurumo looked horrified. I can't fight him head-on anymore. I can't hold on any longer. Tsurumo never thought that in terms of toughness, there would be someone who could be compared to its indestructible body. After dozens of collisions, the opponent became more and more excited, and it became more and more painful. I know, Sarutobi Hirozen nodded. Not to mention Tsurumo couldn't stand it. Sarutobi Hirozen's hands couldn't stand it either. Even though Tsurumo had cleverly removed most of Shikato's punches, the continuous strong blows still left cracks on his hands. Shikato saw this and spat a mouthful of dust to the side. He glanced at the plus sign behind the arm color, which became several points brighter in a short period of time, and was full of dissatisfaction with Sarutobi Hirozen's sudden withdrawal. On the other side, Minato saw this scene and became more and more conflicted. He wanted to preserve both Konoha and Shikato, which was what he promised Kushina and Shikaku. But the Sandaime, the advisor, and even Jiraiya-sensei, didn't seem to think so. Swish. 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 At the same time, the elite support team led by Danzo finally arrived. Bandaged Danzo led the way, followed by 5 Root members, 2 ANBU members, and 2 Konoha elite Jonin. After Danzo arrived, he kept staring at Shikato. The only eye that shone with pure darkness was, Nara Shikato, you dare to betray me. Betray Konoha? Shikato swept his cold eyes over everyone present, and finally sneered, Danzo-sama, isn't this nonsense? Danzo's prestige was reduced by 1, his face suddenly became darker, and he spoke in a gloomy tone, it seems that you have already anticipated the consequences of doing this. Shikato raised his head, and in his eyes that seemed to be covered with a layer of ash, there was an extremely cold killing intent. Either we live in peace and let me go. Or you beat me to death, or, I beat you to death. Danzo narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly, in this case, kill him. 3 Roots, 2 ANBU, and 2 Konoha elite Jonin immediately broke away, and the 7 of them rushed towards Shikato with extremely agile skills. Teeth and teeth. The fastest and most eager to show off were the Inazuka clan, who took the lead. Bang! Smoke rose, and a black-skinned 3-headed wolf was staring at the deer man with a ferocious look, then suddenly jumped into the air, twisted its body and turned into a huge rotating hunting blade. It attacked the deer man directly. After closing the distance, Hyuga Shianmu also stopped suddenly and raised his right hand. 8 trigrams empty palm. His attack was the last one to arrive, and it had already hit the deer man in advance after a distance. It was like a small air cannon. After a muffled sound, the deer man did not move at all, and looked at Hyuga Shianmu. The Byakugan of the Otsutsuki is used by a waste like you. Hyuga Shianmu was stunned for a moment. Although he didn't know which Otsutsuki it was, he still understood the following few adjectives, and he was immediately a little angry. Chakra surged in his body, and he clapped his hands repeatedly. 8 trigrams empty palm. 8 trigrams empty palm. 8 trigrams empty palm. After more than 10 times of 8 trigrams empty palm, the deer man was no longer bothered to look at him, but just snorted slightly and snorted. Then he let a high-speed spinning teeth hit his waist and abdomen. He lowered his eyelids slightly, and glanced at Inazuka Ryo, who was spinning like a top on his waist with a cold look. Inazuka Ryo and his dog were spinning faster and faster. He felt that he had performed beyond his level. Even a diamond would be broken by him, and even the shadow of a village might not be able to take it. But this kind of pride gradually solidified as the corners of the deer man's clothes fluttered. No injury? Not even a tear on the corner of the clothes. Is this possible? Impossible. The next second, Inazuka Ryo, who was spinning in circles, suddenly felt a chill on his spine, and a cold gaze was staring at him. Then a huge fist was pressed down on him who was dancing at high speed. Bang! The ground collapsed. The man and the dog passively stopped the meaningless spiral dance, bleeding all over the ground, and it was likely that they would go to dance like Uchiha Madara in their dreams. While the deer man was attacking Inuzuka Ryo, a flood of black bugs came up and submerged the deer man. The dense black bugs looked extremely creepy. The black bugs had completely wrapped the deer man, but a crisp biting sound came from inside. Crunch! Then the deer man spat on the ground. Didn't they say this thing is high in protein? I thought it would be delicious. It turned out to be a rumor. Armament Haki was released. The dense black bugs wrapped around his body were all blown away, and the dead bugs fell to the ground. The insect masters of the Aburim clan were heartbroken. These little cuties I have raised for several years. The deer man sent one away, and just as he raised his head, 3 slashes of knife light came towards him and flashed by. The 3 small swords stabbed the deer man in 3 vital parts at extremely fast and tricky angles. Heart, throat, anus, Shikato turned around and looked at the attacker behind him with a dark face. Has the elite of Konoha fallen to such a level? He had silver hair and a scarlet Sharingan under the mask. Aha, senior, good afternoon. The next second after Kakashi greeted him, he quickly used the body flash technique to evacuate from here. Bang! The ground collapsed. Shikato knocked away the other 2 attackers, and smashed the position where Kakashi had just attacked with 1 punch. Shikato, you bastard, you are so decisive in escaping. Well done, Kakashi, you actually used this trick on me. Do you really think anyone can't do the same? Chapter 70. The Sand Dame was beaten. On the other side, Yamanaka Hana, who had been preparing for a long time, seemed to have finally found an opportunity. Heart-turning technique boom. There seemed to be a wave in the air. Wow. As soon as the spell was completed, he immediately vomited a mouthful of blood and looked at the deer man with a shocked face. Why is it like this? He can't enter his body at all. In the air, a long ceiling scroll flew over like lightning, caught the gap where the deer man had just shaken off the insect swarm, and wrapped it up. A big word seal appeared in it. Sealing technique, seal. Tisk. However, the tight seal scroll had just been wrapped, and cracks began to appear one after another. Seeing this, Sarutobi Hirozen's face was very ugly. All the methods hit the target, but none of them worked. What's wrong with Nara dear man? Even the scrolls used by the sealing class to seal people are ineffective against him. He raised a Vajraroi stick with a gloomy face. Ape Demon, maximum force. Extend. After receiving the order, the ape demon immediately grew wildly. Before the scroll was completely broken, one end slammed into the heart of the deer man. This time, the ape demon deliberately changed one end into the shape of a needle tip, and stabbed it into the heart of the deer man with extreme sharpness, making sure to pierce the opponent's heart with one blow. The strong impact force knocked the deer man wrapped in the seal scroll back and forth. The needle-shaped Vajra indestructible was indeed fierce, but it still failed to penetrate the deer man's body. Unable to break the defense. The ape demon's mentality has become worse and worse. What kind of monster is this guy? How could he be so hard? Bang! The seal scroll was broken open. The deer man suddenly stabbed out a hand from it, and grabbed the Vajraroi stick with his back hand. The 5 fingers gradually tightened, and the ape demon let out a painful roar. Its Vajra indestructible body has been broken and tattered, and at this moment it seems that it can't withstand the deer man's armament color. The next second, the large seal scrolls shattered all over the sky, and the deer man took advantage of the situation and swung the Vajraroi stick upwards. On the other side, Sarutobi Hirozen was caught off guard and was thrown into the air. His face suddenly changed. Damn it! On the ground, he could still use countless means to deal with it, but in the air, there was no point of force, and he couldn't even hide. The deer man's legs were bent, and his body was pressed down to the lowest point. Others, even Danzo, had realized that something was wrong, and they all formed seals and released ninjutsu to the deer man. The deer man was unmoved. For the time being, there was only one Sarutobi Hirozen in his eyes, and all other targets were ignored. Armament color flowed. Boom. The deer man disappeared on the spot, and the ground was hit by a large-scale coverage of the 4 series ninjutsu of water, fire, thunder and wind, but it all collapsed completely the moment the deer man jumped up. Water, fire, thunder and wind were shaken away by the terrifying shock wave, and the ground kept cracking and collapsing. Even the others who were far away were a little unstable. The deer man had already jumped into the air, facing the lightning ninjutsu spitted out by the sandame, and raised a fist. Boom! The blooming arc of lightning was shattered, and Sarutobi Hiruzen followed closely behind. Who had nowhere to hide. Fortunately, at this last moment, the Vajraruai stick took the initiative to fly over. The demon did not attack the deer man in vain, but slapped Sarutobi Hiruzen away. But it was still a little late after all, and Sarutobi Hiruzen's right thigh was rubbed by the edge. The fist with flowing armed color exploded a large area of air. Sarutobi Hiruzen's entire right leg, even a key part at the end of the thigh, all exploded into blood foam, and even the ball could not be found, and it turned directly into flesh foam and splashed in the air. At the same time, the demon also paid the price for this, and took most of the force of this punch for Sarutobi Hiruzen. The straight stick of the Vajraruai stick folded inward. Large mouthfuls of blood spurted out from the Vajraruai stick. Sarutobi Hiruzen staggered to the ground, losing a whole leg. He covered his crotch with one hand in pain, and his whole body was a little unstable. This time, Sarutobi Asuma had to be the only one. After the Vajraruai stick landed, it turned back into the appearance of a monkey demon and fell to the ground motionless. There was a blood hole as big as a bowl on its abdomen. It lost both arms and had many wounds all over its body. It was extremely miserable. This monkey was obviously not far from death. The moment the deer man flipped over from the air and fell to the ground, everyone looked at him with a hint of disbelief. Doesn't Nara Shikato have any weaknesses? In this case, let alone catching him, even if you want to hurt Nara Shikato, it is simply wishful thinking. Sarutobi Hiruzen's heavy experience made the others immediately surround him with worry on their faces. Kakashi's face also changed slightly. What on earth does Senior Shikaman want to do? In this way, there is no way back. Why would he betray Konoha, and why? Kakashi didn't believe that the senior who had spoken up for his father in public would do such a thing for no reason. But the horrific injuries of the third Hokage were clearly there, and the wound was still bleeding, and the entire thigh was completely gone from the crotch. To be honest, Kakashi was somewhat grateful to the third Hokage. After all, the third Hokage personally apologized to him in public for his father's affairs. But another person who made him more grateful almost killed the third Hokage. So at this moment, Kakashi's mood was a bit complicated. On the side, Danzo's gloomy face was even more depressed at this time. Only when you really face the strength of Nara Shikato can you experience the kind of impeccable despair. But at this moment, Danzo did not regret or fear. Instead, he looked at Nara Shikato who betrayed Konoha and himself with anger. Bastard! Dare to hurt a monkey. Konoha people. I will never let you leave Konoha alive, even if it costs my life. Danzo didn't care about Sarutobi Hiruzen. He would never be so hypocritical. Instead, he stood up with his own actions and looked at the deer man with a gloomy look. Nara dear man, are you ready to die here? The deer man had a blank expression on his face. He had been harassed endlessly, and his irritability and violent emotions were surging in his heart. At this point, he could still say such words so proudly. Danzo, who gave you the courage? The deer man stood on the opposite side, and his cold phoenix eyes narrowed more and more narrowly and murderously with his anger. The armed color domineering around him became more intense. From a distance, the deer man at this moment, although he did not move, still looked like a prehistoric beast that had just awakened. Being swept by those eyes, the hearts of the Konoha ninjas all surged with a creepy feeling. Danzo was unmoved, took a step forward, and said in a sinister tone, if I can pull you out of obscurity, I can also completely destroy you. Deerman narrowed his eyes slightly, ignored Danzo, and instead looked at the two root people standing next to Danzo. What's going on? Suddenly, a sense of crisis came over me. That seal-making action, hiss. Could it be Shiki Fujin? I will update the two chapters together and post them at noon. I won't read the comments for now, they are too easy to affect my mentality. Chapter 71 Deadly Flying Thunder God. Shikato's understanding of Shiki Fujin only stayed in the original book. When he was in the route before, he had come into contact with some of the Uzumaki clan's sealing techniques, but Shiki Fujin was an exception. Shiki Fujin seemed to be in the hands of only a few people. It was an ultimate sealing technique that summoned the god of death by sacrificing oneself and sealing the opponent's soul. Shikato stared at the two root people, who were standing on both sides of Danzo with their hands clasped together, motionless. Although there was nothing abnormal, Shikato inexplicably felt cold all over, as if he was being stared at by something terrifying. He couldn't help but jump back a distance, his expression gradually becoming solemn. The others were a little confused when they saw this. Sarutobi Hiruzen coughed up blood and said weakly, "That seal, is it Shiki Fujin? It seems that Denzo has been preparing for this for a long time." Shiki Fujin? Kakashi was a little confused, but the name sounded a little ominous. Shikato frowned. Shiki Fujin could summon the god of death, and he could be called a god. Even in the world of Naruto, the god of death who was repeatedly toyed with by the impure world reincarnation and the mask of the god of death could not be easily underestimated. The most crucial point is that Shikato can't see anything now. After the armament color is covered, he can't see the god of death that is rumored to be only seen by the caster and the sealed. Suddenly, the two root ninjas were shocked. The clothes on the belly broke into a rip larger than the mouth of a bowl, and two translucent sky blue chakra hands stretched out from the belly, and dark tadpole patterns crawled all over the two arms formed by chakra. It was not until Shikato was locked by Shiki Fujin that he saw the huge god of death floating behind the two root ninjas, wearing mourning clothes. It was large in size, with disheveled hair, translucent, holding a string of black and red Buddhist beads in one hand, and a small knife in his mouth. The tall body was a little skinny, the face was sunken, the bottom of the eyes were dark, but the pupils were glowing with a faint light. What was particularly striking was the two horns on the top of the head, which looked a bit like Kaguya Otsutsuki, one of the alien ancestors in the ninja world. The huge dark pupils seemed to have been watching the deer man. The deer man felt a huge pressure, but he was wary but not afraid. As long as you can see, there is nothing to be afraid of. The most terrifying thing is the invisible enemy. The big hand covered with the black tadpole chakra shot out like a cobra on the hunt. It suddenly stretched out towards the deer man and arrived in an instant. The deer man did not choose to fight hard. Although the armed color has been promoted to the extraordinary level, there is still room for further growth. There is no need to be stubborn at this time. If you can't be stubborn, it will be troublesome. Moreover, he always felt that these guys with horns on their heads were not ordinary people, and their identity as aliens should be beyond doubt. The six-path sage only had two small horns protruding from his forehead. This thing called the Grim Reaper, like Kaguya Otsutsuki, had two very eye-catching horns and was about the same size. Deerman immediately used the body flash technique to disappear from the spot. The chakra hand slapped in the open space. But it did not cause any ripples. Instead, it disappeared directly into the ground, as if it had penetrated into the ground. Deerman frowned, feeling that it was a bit tricky, and his figure flickered again. As soon as he left, two blue hands suddenly stretched out from the ground, but once again they missed. The Grim Reaper swayed, as if a trace of emotion appeared, and the two hands began to extend rapidly. While dodging, Deerman was trying to get closer to the two people at the root. As long as he killed the two of them, the so-called Shiki Fujin would fall apart. It was just that Deerman's repeated dodging seemed to have annoyed the Grim Reaper. However, it was more likely that this time the Shiki Fujin was performed by two people at the same time, but they were sealing the same target. The floating god of death suddenly threw out the string of Buddhist beads wrapped around his wrist. After the beads were thrown out, they merged together one by one to form 9 black beads. The black beads attacked the back of the deer man at an abnormally fast speed. The deer man had never expected that the god of death of the Shikigami Fangjin could actually play tricks, which had never happened in the original book. As a result, he was caught off guard and was hit. Whack! There was a burning pain on his back, and the deer man's dodging figure staggered and fell forward. The corner of his eye swept over the chakra hand that shot like a big snake, and his body immediately used it to escape into the shadow on the ground. The blue chakra hands grabbed nothing again. A black shadow on the ground scurried around, avoiding the hands that symbolized the death seal. In mid-air, a black bead shot from the air and fell towards a black shadow on the ground. When the first bead fell, the deer man was directly knocked out of the shadows, which surprised him. What on earth is this? He was knocked out by a bead after escaping into the shadow state, and his shadow secret technique was easily broken. In fact, the deer man had sensed something was wrong since he was hit on the back before. This small black bead seemed to be very extraordinary. With a hardening degree of his Armament Haki, he was hit by the bead and felt pain, and he almost fell down. This is obviously abnormal. The deer man turned over and condensed a large amount of Armament Haki on his fist while retreating backwards. The observation haki appeared in the depths of his eyes. A sense of danger flashed by in the dark. The deer man successfully grasped the only trace of perception, and threw a very domineering punch directly to the right front, and at the same time jumped up his legs to avoid it in advance. Duh! The black bead appeared here. Boom! A huge shock wave, at the moment of the fist and the bead's collision, swept in all directions in an arc. The air also rolled up a spiral vortex, rushing up to the sky. Cracks spread across the earth. The rest of the people around immediately formed seals, and various defensive ninjutsu such as earth escape and wind escape were at their fingertips. Located in the center of the wave, the deer man who avoided the chakra hand was once again hit by the black bead, but, to be more precise, it was bounced away. The deer man's eyes were solemn. After a real fight, he roughly determined what this thing was. If the guess is correct, this should be a smaller version of the Seeking the Way Jade. No wonder the punch was like hitting cotton. And the power was split and absorbed by the Seeking the Way Jade. Since it is the Seeking the Way Jade, it is not difficult to understand the exaggeration. In this way, this so-called god of death is indeed related to the Six Paths sage. However, his state should be similar to that of Kaguya Otsutsuki. Both of them are in a restricted state, without reason, and seem to be just a soul without emotion. After the collision, Shikato was more certain. He must not be caught by those hands, otherwise, at this stage, the newly upgraded Armament Haki may not be able to withstand it. Shikato kept dodging the chakra hand and the small-sized Seeking Truth Ball. Danzo finally confirmed that the intensity of the deluxe version of the demonic Funjin was indeed enough to suppress Nara Shikato, and it was worth his painstaking preparation. Chapter 72 Shadow Warrior Mode. Danzo began to seal with both hands. Wind style, vacuum ball. He opened his mouth and spit out vacuum bullets one after another like a machine gun. While the deer man was nimble in dodging the hands of the god of death, he was also constantly paying attention to the attacks around him. Danzo was the first to do so, and the other Konoha ninjas also realized that this was a rare opportunity. Shurikens, detonating tags, thousands of kimonos, kyune, lightning style, fire style, and wind style, all kinds of attacks were overwhelming and smashed towards the deer man. Even if the deer man could not be hurt, as long as he could be stopped, the Shiki Fujin would be enough to seal him completely. However, the deer man was extremely fast at this stage, his skills were sharp, and his balance was strong. In addition, with the cooperation of the shadow secret technique, he kept dancing on the tip of the knife. Until a certain moment, when the deer man's instant body technique once again avoided the chakra hand, he felt something was wrong. He turned his head suddenly and looked behind him. A touch of golden hair came into view, and Minato Namikaze appeared here without saying a word. It was not until this moment that Shikaren noticed that there was a special three-pronged kyune stuck under his feet. Minato Namikaze's hand was already on Shikaren's shoulder. Shikaren was stunned. Shui, swish. Shikaren had just uttered a word when the scene in front of him suddenly changed. Flying Thunder God Technique Stage 2. Minato Namikaze used the space-time ninjutsu to forcibly take him away from the original place. However, this so-called taking away did not mean taking him away from Konoha, but appeared right in front of a pair of huge arms covered with tadpole patterns. Bang! The hands of the god of death inserted into the belly of Shikaren, who was caught off guard without any obstruction. Shikaren's face changed drastically, and a surge of anger made his eyes completely red. He gritted his teeth and spat out his name, Minato Namikaze. Minato Namikaze lowered his head, expressionless. I'm sorry, Shikaren. He just lowered his head and didn't look into Shikaren's eyes. After a successful attack, he disappeared again and returned to the side of the Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen and his friends. Sarutobi Hiruzen's weak and pale face finally showed a trace of relief. Minato, you are really worthy of you. Well done. Namikaze. Minato remained silent. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Minato, can you be quiet? Sandaime Sarutobi Hiruzen. The relieved smile on Sarutobi Hiruzen's face froze. Looking at the suddenly completely unfamiliar fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato at this moment did not have a trace of the sunshine and cheerfulness of the past. Indifferent, calm, looking at him as if he were a stranger. Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart was a little dazed. He saw the shadow of Orochimaru in Minato. Fortunately, this incident of Shikato will eventually end, and Konoha will be peaceful and stable again. The hands of the god of death drilled into his stomach, and Shikato immediately felt an unprecedented tearing pain, as if someone was cutting his soul bit by bit with a saw. Dearman expected that his Armament Haki might not be able to withstand the chakra of the Death God, but he did not expect that he would be suddenly stabbed in the back by the silent Minato Namikaze. And it was such a critical one-hit kill style. The more pain he felt physically, the more difficult it was for him to suppress his anger. Golden Flash. If he didn't strike, it would be fine, but if he struck, it would be a sure kill. Dearman's eyes were filled with gloom, and his murderous intent was boiling. He could no longer suppress his malice. Minato Namikaze, Dearman was so painful that he wanted to bite his teeth to pieces. The intense pain in his soul made him miserable. The huge Death God had floated over at some point and raised the knife of death high up. Dearman bit his tongue hard and calmed himself down again. He took a deep breath, and his dark eyes soon became completely calm. Use the ultimate move, secret technique, Shadow Warrior mode. Countless black shadows on the ground climbed up Dearman's body frantically, and the rich Armament Haki of the breakthrough level immediately dyed the shadows extremely black. In just a few moments, the whole body of Shikato was completely covered by black shadows, and shadow patterns wrapped around his body. Shadow Warrior mode. He had already developed it before his Armament Haki had reached the extraordinary level. Initially, it was inspired by the attack of the A-Tail's continuous tail beast ball. Using the shadow manipulation technique of Yindun, a large amount of black shadows were covered on the body, and then a large amount of Armament Haki was wrapped around the shadow patterns to achieve a double doubling effect. Finally, the Dark Shadow Dancer mode was formed in front of him. This is Shikato's ultimate move. He had never used it before. On the one hand, it was unnecessary, and on the other hand, this move was somewhat similar to Luffy's fourth gear. The amount of domineering consumed was extremely amazing. When the top-level Armament Haki was turned on, it could only last for less than 2 seconds before the domineering was exhausted, and the physical loss was also not small. It was really a bit useless. After initially advancing to the extraordinary level, the Armament Haki domineering was also greatly improved, so that it was extended from 2 seconds to 6 seconds. But the sequelae still exist. The longer it lasts, the more thoroughly the domineering energy is consumed. After 6 seconds, he will enter a weakened state. However, while it is useless, it has a great benefit. In Shadow Warrior mode, Shikato's state is more than 5 times that of normal conditions. In the next 6 seconds, Shikato can be said to be in a peak period of transformation. However, he must calculate the time well and reserve at least 2 seconds to leave the battle. Otherwise, once he falls into weakness and is blocked by such a group of people, he will definitely die. Although he can basically use these 2 seconds to kill most people. But on the one hand, Namikaze Minato's Flying Thunder God is always an uncertain factor. On the other hand, there is no guarantee that other people will come, and then he will really be unable to escape. So he must end it all within 4 seconds. If possible, Shikato does not want to use this trick, because he really does not like to expose his weakness. But now, if he does not use it again, he is afraid that he will never have a chance. Shikato's changes once again attracted the attention of the Konoha ninjas, who had just breathed a sigh of relief. The dark shadow pattern wrapped around the deer man's body, and the braids behind his head spread out on their own, and his black hair flew up. The deer man opened his eyes, which were different from the dark pupils under normal circumstances. At this moment, the deer man was completely opposite, with the whites of his eyes completely black, and the originally dark pupils turned into pure white pupils. The deer man stretched out his hands and grabbed the blue hands that kept pulling the soul in his body. His 5 fingers suddenly exerted force and directly crushed the arm covered with dark tadpole patterns. Then he raised his eyebrows, and his white pupils stared at the expressionless death god who was holding a sharp knife high. In the Shadow Warrior mode, the state is fully open. The steps are staggered, and then the arms are stretched to a great limit. The armed color domineering flows wildly on the inky black fist, and the black lightning arc jumps on the whole arm. A second before the blade fell, the deer man shouted loudly and hit out with all his strength. The air seemed to be twisted, and circles of invisible ripples twisted and shattered. Then the ground began to crack, and a huge rift valley quickly spread out under his feet. Finally, the sky began to break, the clouds shattered, and the air swirled up, as if the sky had also collapsed. The short knife of the god of death was about to fall, and it solidified. Then the whole huge and bony body began to crack, like a broken porcelain man, with cracks crawling all over the body. Finally, in silence, it seemed like a gust of wind blew and dissipated completely. Chapter 73 Golden Flash. Until this moment, the violent fluctuations caused by this terrifying punch began to spread. The already dilapidated environment around was completely swept by the violent shock wave in an instant. Everything inside and outside the jungle was completely destroyed in a few breaths. The elites of Konoha held up one earth escape ninjutsu after another. Hold it up, crush it, hold it up again, and crush it again. After several cycles, they finally withstood this shocking impact. On the ground, a large rift that had just been hit appeared in front of everyone. It was bottomless, winding, and the length of the rift was extremely shocking. Gulp. When others saw this scene clearly, they were all stunned. Danzo also opened his mouth, and some of it couldn't close. He had expected everything, and even had already prepared the candidates for the Shikigami Fusion, all for this moment. But he didn't expect that Nara Shikato's strength could be so terrifying. Who would have thought that he not only took on the Shiki Fusion, but also blew up the Shinigami of the Shiki Fusion? How could he play with this? Danzo was a little confused. Before the aftermath had completely dissipated, Shikato's white eyes had already stared at Danzo. To be more precise, it was the two roots beside Danzo. Although the Shinigami was shattered by a punch, it did not completely disappear, but recondensed behind these two people. The ghost is still there. A haze flashed in Shikato's eyes. Boom. The air exploded. He suddenly disappeared from the spot, and the others wiped their eyes immediately. You can't see it, it's too fast. It's just a ripple of after images in the air. There was a light snapping sound from the place where the two roots, including Danzo, were in a group of three. Then, a large piece of blood foam had already splashed in the air. Only 3 pairs of legs below the waist and abdomen were left on the spot, and the upper body parts were all turned into blood foam. The figure of the deer man did not appear until this moment, making a simple gesture of raising his hand. When the speed and strength are strong enough, even a slight touch will be as terrifying as a bomb. Without the caster of the Shikigami Fusion, the death god that was originally gathering disappeared immediately. 4 seconds have passed, and the Shadow Warrior mode can only last for the last 2 seconds. The deer man threw his full killing intent at Minato Namikaze, but the next moment he suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood. The deer man's face suddenly darkened. The soul was torn apart by the death god before, and the few times he was hit by the small-sized seeking jade, he was not completely unscathed. The most important thing is that the real action of the Shadow Warrior mode caused pressure on himself completely beyond his expectations. The speed and strength that exceeded the limit were not something his current physique could bear at all. Just one shot, and now his own physique can't hold it. This is a bit worse than he expected. The shadow patterns around him retreated like a tide, and the Shadow Warrior mode dissipated ahead of time. Deerman wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. This move was even more useless than he had imagined. He hurt the enemy 1,000 times but injured himself 800 times. At the same time, a figure that changed from real to fake began to emerge where Danzo's legs were left. Deerman frowned. Izanagi? Danzo, this old silver coin, really had a 3 Magatama Sharingan. Deerman had no chance to attack him again. Although the Shadow Warrior mode faded ahead of time, he retained a small amount of Armament Haki, so he could still hold on for a while. But his body was severely damaged by the backlash of the Shadow Warrior mode. His abdomen was cramped and his arms also felt a tearing pain. He felt like his whole body was falling apart just by moving. Deerman no longer hesitated. He took advantage of the opportunity when the others were still in shock and amazement, and directly escaped into the shadows and began to evacuate here at a very fast speed. By the time the others reacted, Deerman had disappeared. Only one person remained calm. Minato Namikaze took out a 3-pronged kunai that he carried with him, held it in his palm and said calmly, "I'll go after him." The Sandaime seemed to be hesitant to speak. He already regretted listening to Danzo and forcing Nara Shikato to stay. Nara Shikato's strength was so terrifying. He should have listened to the 4th Hokage earlier. Just let him leave temporarily, like Tsunade, and use the bond as a bond. Judging from the Nara clan and the relationship between the 4th Hokage and Nara Shikato should not retaliate against Konoha, but now it is uncertain. Being stabbed in the back by the 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze, the relationship between them was as bad as it was before. Sarutobi Hiruzen closed his eyes with a little pain. How did the situation become so bad little by little? In the desolate and dilapidated valley, it was here that Kushina successfully reached a mutual understanding with Kirima and became the 3rd perfect Jinchuriki in the ninja world. Shikato also appeared here, dragging his body full of fatigue and pain. As soon as he jumped out of the shadow, he couldn't help vomiting blood again. He half-crouched on his knees. The burden caused by the cage warrior mode still made him miserable. He was breathing heavily and the severe cramps continued. Shikato stood up straight and looked back at the golden figure not far behind him. Namake's Minato caught up again. Shikato was not surprised, but turned his head to look at the black mark on his shoulder. The Flying Thunder God mark. This was left when he was transferred by Namake's Minato. He had expected that the other party would catch up. Namake's Minato looked at him calmly. Teacher Jiraiya is dead, Kasuke told me. And what the Sandim said is true. I am the fourth Hokage of Konoha? Shikato raised his eyebrows indifferently, still trying to endure the cramps all over his body. Thanks to him, he almost died under the Shikigami Fujin just now. The two stopped talking. The next second, Namake's Minato threw a three-pronged kunai at Shikato. Swoosh! Minato Namake's disappeared in an instant, and using the Flying Thunder God seal, he appeared directly behind Dearman, rubbing a Rasengan with his hand and hitting Dearman's head. Dearman turned his head to look, and instead of dodging, he grabbed Minato Namake's with his backhand. Minato Namake's disappeared again a second before he was about to be caught by him. Instead, he appeared at the position of the kunai that was shot at the passerby. The Rasengan hit Dearman's abdomen directly. The fierce destructive force of the rotation made Dearman frown. The domineering aura of the Armament Haki was consumed too much, so that when it covered the whole body, the hardening effect of the Armament Haki was no longer as good as before. The impact force knocked Dearman out. But while flying out, Dearman, with his extremely exaggerated balance, reached out to grab Minato Namake's again. Previously, Gamabunta and Jiraiya had succeeded in his unexpected attack method. But Minato Namake's was obviously an exception. The Flying Thunder God technique was like a plug-in. It was okay to have no seal an instant, but it was also quite outrageous. Minato Namake's has flashed again, and once again appeared behind the deer man in mid-air, and stabbed the back of the deer man's head with a three-pronged kunai. The back of the deer man's head hurt a little. No one knew what material Minato Namake's three-pronged kunai was made of. It was almost as hard as the diamond stick of the monkey demon. However, Minato Namake's attack paused for a moment, and then he disappeared there again with the Flying Thunder God, and reappeared where he stood at the beginning, where a three-pronged kunai was also inserted. In just one round of attack, the Flying Thunder God technique was so fast that it was hard to keep up. This is the origin of the Golden Flash, and the speed alone is ridiculous. The deer man rolled over and landed, spitting blood foam to the side. The situation was somewhat passive for him. He fell into the same situation as when he faced AI and the Killer Bee brothers before, where he was restrained by the super high-speed movement. Chapter 74 The Last Flash. Minato Namake's escape just now was certainly not out of mercy, but just avoiding the shadow on the ground. Once he made up his mind, he never hesitated. He took out several three-pronged kunai from his pocket and threw them at the deer man at the same time. The deer man squatted down and touched the ground with his hand. The shadow spread out and stood up like thorns. Block all these kunai outside. As long as this kind of Flying Thunder God style kunai is not allowed to get close, the position where Minato Namake's can launch an attack will be very clear. Sure enough, Minato Namake's appeared again, and it was behind the deer man again. As soon as he appeared, he was directly pierced by a dark shadow thorn. Bang! The shadow clone exploded. Only a three-pronged kunai was left on the spot. Swish! Before the kunai landed, Minato Namake's real body appeared instantly, with less than half a second between the two. There was not even time for the deer man to be stunned. The hand-rolled Rasengan had already hit his back again. The spiral impact caused Shikato to rush forward a big step, his clothes were torn a little, and his back felt a burning pain. The shadow on the ground raised a sharp knife, but before it could touch Minato Namake's, he disappeared again. Flying Thunder God. Shikato frowned. This move was indeed Minato Namake's famous skill. It was faster to use than the inventor, the second-generation Senju Tobirama. In the air, a golden figure reappeared. A three-pronged kunai was shot out. Then he formed seals with both hands. Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. Bang! White smoke exploded, and the overwhelming three-pronged kunai immediately flew over, densely packed like locusts passing through. Shikato's eyes darkened. Can Flying Thunder God be played like this? At this moment, Minato Namake's had already rolled out another Rasengan in his hand. Shikato clapped his hands, and the shadow on the ground pulled up a high wall, wrapped in armed color. Ding ding dang dang. The crisp sound of collisions outside the shadows continued. But the deer man suddenly looked behind him, and happened to meet the side of Minato Namikaze, who appeared there again. When Minato Namikaze's Rasengan was about to hide him again, the shadow on the ground formed a very thin line, and was about to touch his body. Minato Namikaze's eyes flashed, and suddenly disappeared again, avoiding the shadow on the ground, and turned to appear on the ground to the left of the deer man where a three-pronged kunai was inserted. But as soon as he appeared, he just met the palm of the deer man who had raised it in advance. This kunai was deliberately kept by him, just to leave Minato Namikaze with more bait for attack. Minato Namikaze was slightly startled. Armament Haki was released. At a very close distance, the Armament Haki shock wave was instantly shut out. Minato Namikaze flashed again, but it was a little late after all. He fell to the ground, his right arm was bloody and his shoulder bone was broken. In fact, it is not suitable for Minato Namikaze to fight against Shikato with such a high frequency of attacks. Instead, he should take advantage of his speed, seize the opportunity to kill with one blow, and constantly wear down Shikato's armed color domineering. Only in this way can Minato Namikaze have a chance to win. However, Shikato is in a very bad state at the moment. This is a rare opportunity, and Minato Namikaze naturally does not want to miss it. Otherwise, if Shikato is in good condition, he may not be able to break the defense even if he stands still. Minato Namikaze lacks powerful ninjutsu against people. Shikato has room for trial and error. Even if his domineering is not much and his physical condition is very poor, he can still withstand several attacks. It is not a big problem for Minato Namikaze to hide him several times in a row. But Minato Namikaze did not have that. Just a side attack broke his shoulder bone. Shikato turned to take the initiative to attack, stepped on the spot, and rushed out instantly. Minato Namikaze bit a kunai with his mouth, and after another flash, he appeared on a three-pronged kunai stuck in the ground. But before he landed, the shadow under the kunai suddenly raised spikes and attacked fiercely. Namikaze Minato flashed again and narrowly avoided it. But after several times, he found that there was a shadow hidden under each Flying Thunder God kunai. The Nara clan's shadow secret technique was used to perfection by Deer Man. Namikaze Minato directly gave up the Flying Thunder God technique and used the body flickering technique to avoid Deer Man's punch again. He threw out a three-pronged kunai from his pocket again and disappeared again. Deer Man narrowed his eyes slightly and opened his observation haki with all his strength. Namikaze Minato's figure appeared in front of him, and the three-pronged kunai in his hand pierced Deer Man's pupils and enlarged them rapidly. But at the last second, he abandoned the kunai and appeared behind Deer Man, rubbing his hand with a Rasengan and hitting Deer Man's lower back again. A shadow suddenly stood up from the ground and pierced his abdomen. But Minato Namikaze's figure blurred for a moment, and it was just a residual shadow. The real master reappeared in the kunai in front, and the Rasengan was less than 1 centimeter away from the Deer Man's head. When the Rasengan hit the Deer Man's head completely, the Deer Man also grabbed Minato Namikaze's arm with his backhand. With a little force, it exploded into a cloud of smoke. Another shadow clone. The real master suddenly appeared behind the Deer Man again and slapped the Deer Man's back with one hand. Eightfold curse binding technique. The Deer Man suddenly felt that his limbs were extremely heavy, as if a 1,000-pound weight was hung on him, and his whole back was bent a little. But the huge weight did not hinder the shadow manipulation secret technique. At the same time that Minato Namikaze touched him in an instant, the shadows that had been set up on the ground in advance also entangled Minato Namikaze's legs. After all, there were only a few places where the Flying Thunder God landed around, and even if Minato Namikaze played a trick, it would be just like that. The Deer Man was well prepared under the defense of the observation haki. Minato Namikaze's Flying Thunder God was sluggish for a moment because of the restraint of the shadow, and this short pause gave him the opportunity. A dark thigh stretched out from the shadow, like a whip, and hit Minato Namikaze's chest fiercely. Wow! A large mouthful of blood spurted out, and he flew backwards. Unlike the Deer Man, Minato Namikaze had no room for trial and error. Once hit, it was basically over, especially when he was kicked head-on without defense. Even if it was not the Deer Man's body, but a kick from the shadow wrapped in armed color. It was definitely not something that the fragile Minato Namikaze could withstand. After falling on his back for more than 100 meters, Minato Namake's face was full of splattered blood, and he gasped for breath. Under the pressure of his chest, his breathing was as heavy as a bellows. Several ribs in his abdomen were broken, and key parts were also stabbed. Minato Namake pulled the corner of his mouth miserably, and his gums were full of blood. After a moment, Shikato used his Armament Haki to successfully get rid of the seal, and walked silently to Minato Namake's. Looking at the fourth generation Minato Namake who was lingering on the ground, Shikato narrowed his eyes deeply. Minato Namake, do you have any last words? Minato Namake was also staring at him, and suddenly showed a bleak smile as if he was relieved, with scarlet blood foam on his gums, and he spoke the last few words in a very weak voice. After listening, Shikato sent Minato Namake away with an expressionless face. This plot is not over yet, and there is another dance. Chapter 75 The Final Performance. A breeze blew gently across the valley, cold and bleak. Shikato leaned against the mountain wall, hunched over, and in great pain. After a series of battles, especially the one in the Shikigami ceiling, the burden brought by the Kagemusha mode was heavy. His body was already in a mess, and the entanglement with Minato Namake made his injuries even worse. The muscles on his body were torn in many places, and some organs were also injured to varying degrees. There were also countless other large and small internal and external injuries. But Shikato just took a short rest, treated his injuries simply, and then tied his hair up again. He stood up again, calmed his breath, and then walked towards Konoha without saying a word. The shadow under his feet wrapped around him little by little, and his body shape and appearance began to change rapidly. After being messed with so much, Shikato had been suppressing a lot of anger in his heart and couldn't vent it. As a ninja, you must keep your word. Since we said we were going to kill White Zetsu, we must not let him get away alive. The dear man's eyes were filled with gloom, indifference, suppressed pain, and unspeakable fatigue, and he finally left the valley alone. The entire desolate valley was completely silent. An eagle spread its wings and soared in the sky. Without any pause, it flew straight over the valley and flew towards the boundless sea in the distance. In the end, only a newly added grave was left in the valley, standing there alone. The dear man's appearance was changing little by little under the simulation of the shadow. Part of his body shrank into the shadow, making him look much shorter. A wooden vortex mask began to emerge on his cheek, and the scarlet 3 Magatama Sharingan leaked out of the hole in his right eye. Of course, these were just the appearances simulated by the shadow, and they only had the shape. Finally, he changed into a familiar black windbreaker and put on black shackles on his wrists. When he raised his head again, the information about Uchiha Obito and the Nine-Tails attack in the future was almost the same as in Yin's memory. Shikato's understanding of Uchiha Obito was basically the impression left by the original work. However, he had seen a portrait of Uchiha Obito and some trivial intelligence in the route before, in black and white. So the overall disguise still had some flavor. It was just a trick, who wouldn't know how to do it? Shikato knew as much as Black Zetsu. Before, he always thought along the timeline of the original plot, and subconsciously took himself out and left it out. As a result, he suffered such a big loss this time without paying attention. How could he let it go like this? To be honest, as for the Black Zetsu thing, except for not knowing the specific location of the hiding place, he had seen the other stories in the original work a long time ago, and he could act them out 10 times without lines. If it weren't for the worsening of his own situation, he would have treated him well. When he has time later, he might ask someone to shoot a few big movies. Play it for free in the streets and alleys of the ninja world, let Black Zetsu and his hot mom become famous together. Don't you like hiding? Then hide well, it's better not to let me find you forever. The dear man walked faster and faster, the black shadows in his hands slowly gathered, and a bamboo hat also condensed into shape. After buckling it on his head, he looked like a wandering ninja at first glance. Before leaving completely, he put on another good show, for Konoha, and for the 2 cubs of Black and White Zetsu. At the same time, the Konoha village was more lively than ever before. This time, the liveliness was not because the bloody storm caused by the deer man was reported back to the village. In fact, the 3rd generation Saratobi Hirozen has issued a gag order on this matter, and it is strictly forbidden to spread it in a short time. Otherwise, the ninja world that has just calmed down may set off waves again. Konoha can no longer bear the cruelty of war, and even the entire ninja world needs to rest and recuperate. As a result, Sarutobi Hirozen and others just returned to the village and found that their village was in chaos. A member of the ANBU came in a hurry and told him the latest news: Orochimaru, one of the 3 ninjas of Konoha, had defected. After hearing this, Sarutobi Hirozen, who was already seriously injured, suddenly felt dizzy and could no longer hold on. His eyes went black and he fainted. The 3 ninjas of Konoha have come to an end. In the Konoha ninja village, it has been widely known that Orochimaru used the living people in the village to conduct taboo experiments. At first, an enthusiastic villager reported this to the Uchiha clan, and the righteous Uchiha successfully discovered the key point of the matter. It happened that there were only 2 consultants left in the village's senior management, and the most powerful one seemed to have gone out. So the Uchiha was bold enough, and he had always had a bad relationship with Orochimaru. In the Hokage election a while ago, he was cheated by both sides and was still very angry. He simply went all out and led a team to jointly investigate several underground laboratories of Orochimaru. However, they were so determined to do it that Shikato had never expected it. They were so ruthless. What were they doing? With the guidance of enthusiastic villagers, some of Orochimaru's forbidden experiments could not be hidden. Before, Danzo helped to cover it up, and Sarutobi Hirozen also turned a blind eye. But after the war, Orochimaru could not catch a living target for the experiment, so he could only start with his own family. It was only a matter of time before he was exposed, but it was exposed by Uchiha in advance. Originally, the 2 consultants wanted to temporarily suppress this sudden storm. At least as the 3 ninjas of Konoha and the disciples of the Sandaime, they could not be slandered too badly, otherwise it would affect the influence of the Hokage in the village. As a result, Uchiha secretly posted small reports all over the village, and the matter could not be suppressed at all. Orochimaru didn't care. After losing the only small target of the Yondaime, he completely sank into the forbidden human experiments. His attachment to Konoha has become less and less, and now his mind is full of taboos about immortality. It happened that the village's high-level combat power was empty, so he simply went all out, picked up his bag and ran away without any regrets. However, as he ran away, the rumors about the forbidden human experiments became more and more exaggerated. In the end, it was even said that Sarutobi Hirozen cooperated with Danzo and secretly supported Orochimaru to conduct human experiments continuously in order to achieve immortality and achieve the goal of permanent control of Konoha. The 3 of them were quietly nicknamed the New Iron Triangle of Konoha Ninja Village, and they were another new force of middle-aged and elderly people after the F4 group. It is said that the initial news came from a red-eye disease patient whose name was not convenient to reveal. Once it was spread, there was an uproar and the speed of spread was extremely fast. Uchiha never left his name when doing good things, but he just didn't have the habit of covering up the traces. Konoha Ninja Village was originally in the highest state of alert, but with the defection of Orochimaru and the spread of the forbidden experiments, the village was full of discussions. The elite troops of the ANBU began to move out one after another to participate in the pursuit of Orochimaru. The village had just come out of the war and was short of manpower. Then there were the incidents of Nara Shikato and Orochimaru. The village's defenses were becoming increasingly insufficient. Shikato's escape into the shadows and his re-entry into the Konoha Ninja Village was extremely easy. Konoha had been tormented too badly. Shikato closed his eyes and felt the position of the shadow mark. He didn't rush over in a rush. In his current state, if he used all his strength, he would not be able to contain his injuries. He had to escape immediately after the fight. Since the other party was not in a hurry to escape, he didn't mind giving himself a break. He could still spare his time and do something small to liven things up. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.